Try that again, live stream audio check.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to members of the public and visiting councillors, as well as, of course, to Cabinet colleagues. The usual things I have to read out. You know that you follow us. If there's an emergency, we'll be going quite quickly. But formally, there are no practice alarms planned for this evening. If an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall. We're going down this main staircase or the back staircase excuse me, to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwood Street. In the case of any disturbance, not expecting any, which requires the Cabinet to withdraw, councillors should go to the Mayor's parlour using the doors behind me and await further advice. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel. Will also be available to listen to afterwards. Use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcome, but you're requested to use them discreetly and not to disturb the meeting. Set them to silent, not use voice or camera flash functions, please. Could I remind everybody, Cabinet members and others, use the microphones. You can remind me if I forget. Let me introduce the work of the Cabinet. It's the main executive body of the Council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision making on all Council services and makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues, and as tonight, on the Council's budget. Cabinet's made up of 8 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I'll introduce myself and then colleagues. So my name is Councillor David King, leader of the Council. I'll go to my far left and then come round. Alison.
Councillor Alison Jay, portfolio holder for economy, transformation and performance. Councillor Natalie Summers, Portfolio Holder for Communities.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Pam Donnelly, Chief Executive.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, Portfolio Holder for Resources and Representative for Wivenhoe.
Councillor Michelle Burrows, Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Culture and Heritage and Representative of Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan, Cabinet Member for Planning, Environment and Sustainability and Ward Member for Wivenhoe.
Martin Goss, I'm Neighbourhoods and Waste and I'm Mile End Ward.
Thank you very much. We have one of our own unable to attend, that's Councillor Smith, so his apologies for the record. We'll move on. Item 2, urgent items.
There are none, Chair.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, I invite Cabinet members to declare any. I see none. Item 4 is the minutes. I invite Cabinet to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of December 23.
Agreed.
Thank you. And then we go to item 5, which is have your say. Now, many looking at you in the audience have been here before, know the rules, but bear with me if I just refresh them. So in a formal sense, we've got a 15-minute limit, but looking at the number of people in the audience, we're not going to rather go past that. So I'll just remind individuals, so it's 3 minutes, 2 minutes is a bell, and then 1 minute extra. I really ask everybody to stop at that point. Otherwise, you'll be delaying us and everybody behind you in that long queue of people wanting to speak. I also want to talk about subject matter. It can be as varied, and I know it will be, as the matters of the moment and the passions of the moment. But for those who've come to follow up on last night's 4-hour scrutiny meeting, please ask we don't rerun all of that for reasons that councillors will or should understand. Ask visiting councillors to return back to their seats if they could, please, to make way for other colleagues. I ask members to have your say as much as they can about a question. That helps the audience and helps the flow. If there's anything that's on anybody's mind in the audience, whether you're a member or not, that's deeply technical or detailed, it may be better that we take it away, but I will acknowledge the point and make a decision when we're into the subject. But as I say, just think about who else is in the room and who else might be watching. We're always open to discussion here, which was the right thing, but the more technical and deep it is, the less inclusive it is. All right, look, thank you very much. And look and see who we got first. And that is Sir Bob Russell, our High Steward. Bob, you know this place so well. Please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak as a resident. I have 60 years' knowledge of the council, 31 as a participant, 29 as observer, as I am now. And I think these are the most challenging times for all councils in terms of finances. And therefore, it is important that financial prudence is what it's all about. Now, the Colchester City Master Plan has cost the public purse £142,305, which are figures I've been able to get from Freedom of Information request. They have been published as far as I'm aware. I have to say that in my 60 years of life, I've seen many, many reports, and these don't rate at all highly. It's been brought together by consultants who are based in London, fleeting visits, and now they're scarpered. The local plan committee Monday last week, only 8 out of the 10 people turned up, by the way. And I'm puzzled as to why something of this magnitude has been dealt with by a committee and hasn't gone to full council after full council debated the Gaza Strip. I'd have thought Colchester City Master Plan is something which should have been debated by all councillors, particularly as the local plan itself was. Now, the car park revenue in the current financial year brings in about £3.5 million. Now, this report is very much anti-car, There are only 22 mentions of the car in here, but 81 for cycles or cycling. So it sort of gives you an indication of where this one is going and where it's coming from. I've tried to find out what the estimate has been made of in the coming year if you put up car parking charges, but I can't get that answer. I'm pleased to say the animated river nonsense being dropped, but the Roman Wall Park is still there. Now, I would suggest that the council should try and increase. We're told there are 800 spare places. Well, I would suggest that you should be trying to increase revenue, not reduce revenue. And you've blown an officer under delegated powers, I understand, has blown £90,000 by closing part of Vineyard Street car park. But I'd like to end on the last one. Why is the council so anti the bingo hall in Osborne Street? Because those of you who have read the report will know that on page 71, the closure of the bingo club is advocated. The actual words it says, paragraph 11 on page 71, Osborne Street car park and ground floor bingo hall encourage change of use of ground floor space to things other than the bingo. It's got more members than all the political parties in Colchester combined.
Thank you, Bob. You're being, as you are, very vivid in drawing attention, and I understand why you do. You have a passion for your city. In fairness, I hope you might have said, so do the rest of us. We haven't got, perhaps all of us, I haven't, your longevity, but we care deeply, which is why we do what we do, about the city that we have. The master plan's gone through a robust process. It's had councillor engagement in different levels. It's to the local plan. I applaud that, and I know that many members have taken it really seriously. We've had an extensive consultation process. We've taken on board the responses and the different levels that come to us, both in shaping it and then in responding to those who disliked certain parts of it. I think it's a cracking document if you accept what it is, that it's shaped for the city of now and the future in terms of guidance and a vision which will be tested and developed stage by stage. So there's a lot more to do on each and every possibility that's encompassed within the master plan. Planning's not cheap, Bob. You know this. Investing some funds in a reasoned manner to ensure that we have a focused dialogue and some differences of view about where the city can and might go, I think is absolutely the right thing and central to what we do. You've raised some other points, Bob. Perhaps I'll just pick up one which is around the point about car parking. Now, we have award-winning officers on this. We'll have a car parking strategy refreshed and up for debate. My understanding is that minor differences that are proposed or possible will not overall make a material difference to our income. We're so alive to the importance of, I see your skepticism, but there we go. We're so alive, as tonight is all about, the importance of getting our books to balance as we should, that we'll not take any decisions around income, anything other than responsibly. I'll stop there. Thank you. You have a moment to wish to reply.
Okay, nobody else wants to speak. Chairman, it took me 6 hours to read that one, 6 hours to read the original one. I have 3 minutes tonight. I had 3 minutes at the local plan committee. That is not what I call an opportunity for proper debate. You have not explained why the council is cutting revenue from car parking when it is one of your main sources of income. You have not explained why you are not promoting any business with spare capacity would be seeking to fill it. And for let's pitch it a bit low, 10%. Just try and fill those 10% of those spaces over the year. That brings you in over £200,000. And you're making cuts, and I understand that. Can I just, you have not answered why the council, and who gave the steer? Was it politicians? Was it the planners? Who gave the steers to this London consultants saying, shut the bingo hall?
Well, we're not about shutting the bingo hall. We are about looking at the future of our city in an imaginative kind of way.
Chairman.
And that's it.
It says encourage. It encourages the closure of the ground floor, which is the bingo hall. Encourage. Inspire with confidence.
Bob, you've had your moment. I understand. I'm happy to talk to you, Bob, if you're willing to talk away from this place and give you time if you're prepared to make that a two-way exchange. Thank you. Mr. Orton, Trevor Orton, please. Thank you. Trevor, 2 minutes, bell, and a minute. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. You wouldn't think the time I've been here I'd know which button to press, but there you go. I'm knocking on a bit now. I suppose you can excuse me. In actual fact, my intention was to be in the other room in the next meeting. So in a sense, I've at the age of 82, I'm sure when I switch it around to 28, you will excuse me. However, first of all, I would like to say that since most of you know, I've been on sort of a crusade of my own since 2016. And it's been a very lonely journey in many ways. That means emails and phone calls ignored, etc., etc. But at last, in 2022, we have the new council in, and we are now, or as far as I'm concerned, working much closer together, which I think is thanks now to Councillor King and the zone wardens, and a little bit of input from myself. For that, I am grateful. It's lifted my morale up tremendously. So a thank you there. And there's no brown envelopes, by the way, on this. This is purely straight to Mr. King as a thank you. And let us hope that 2024 becomes the year when Colchester deserves its upgrade from town to city. There's a long way to go, but we are getting there slowly but surely. My main issue of being here today, in fact, it should have been in the other location, was about the state of our telephone boxes in the high street, and particularly at Britannia, where all the cars come and go, etc., etc. And where people wait for the traffic lights and they see the filthy set of traffic lights, one, in fact, with no door on that on those telephone boxes. The ones in the high street, which I personally cleaned and scrubbed myself a few years ago, in fact, 2 years ago or 3, they are once again in a filthy state. During the time that I was cleaning them, I did speak to a councillor who I will not name, who claimed to me that, in fact, British Telecom had a project which was to remove them. That obviously, I think, was pie in the sky, because as you well know, gentlemen and ladies, nothing has happened. My point about it is we claim now to be a city from town to city, and these issues, in my opinion, are extremely important. Just imagine a lady from Timbuktu who's in the Crown or in the hotel, she forgets her mobile, oh, there's a phone box, and in she goes, and she's confronted with a stench that sometimes, not all the time, with booze and vomit on the floor, and in my case, 2 condoms. Now, why there was 2, I have no idea, except they may have had one hell of a time. But the question is, ladies and gentlemen, those telephone boxes, in my opinion, and only mine, are filthy, and they shouldn't be there, and they should be removed. And my question is, whose responsibility are those telephone boxes? BT made it perfectly clear that they are not responsible for their maintenance, and they're not responsible for the phone control. All the equipment, all the equipment in those telephone boxes is defunct. It doesn't work. The only people that use them are the sleepers, where they want somewhere to get warm, and we won't go into other reasons. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Keeping this simple, we'll take away again the question of ownership of those boxes. There has been a dialogue with some officers on the back of this, including about how we might use our street wardens to, and their capacity is stretched, to see if they can add to the cleaning regime. So let me take that one away. Well, let me thank you for two things. One for coming here, and it's a rare treat to have a moment of generosity. It's not usually the game here, and that is also fine. Challenge is part of the business that we all seek to do. That's our democracy at work. But thank you for that, and for your, I have to say, remorseless attention to detail in providing me and others with pictures and issues which you think we should address. And I think we got better at that, and I'm grateful for your acknowledgement. Thank you for coming.
Can I go now? Thank you very much.
Mr. Ian Drew. Hello, Ian. Welcome. You've been here before. Could I just ask you to watch the clock, please, as you went well over last time? So it's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, I'm aware of that. It's just a short statement tonight, really. Some of what I was going to say has now been cut out because I've spoken to Councillor Luxford-Vaughan before the meeting, so some of what I was going to cover was there. You know, and I've come back tonight at the risk of being labelled a conspiracy theorist yet again, I've no doubt. But it's really about the response that we've not been getting over the last 12 months from various issues that the public has brought to your attention. And obviously I need to know regarding 5G, which was the main thing I talked about the last time, and we've been doing a lot of work testing around the city. And some of this is what I'm going to present to Councillor Luxford-Vaughan when I get the opportunity. You're all the council I consider as educated, sensible people, with maybe the exception of one whose name I won't mention. And you must realise that this agenda being pushed by central government is affecting all of us. And you're really just the foot soldiers doing their dirty work. And in the end, like us, you don't really matter to them. We're all just cannon fodder. Throughout history, the people have been the ones who have suffered for the empire. We will never surrender. We're all in it together. That's what they tell us. But now they want us to surrender so they can stay on top. The WHO, the WEF, the UN and NATO, this will be the new empire. Maybe just another conspiracy theory. Well, think about it and do some research. And instead of being the first city in the country to adopt 5G, let's talk about it together and try and reject the madness. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ian. And on behalf of all of us, want to acknowledge that there is a space for an alternative opinion. It's not one shared, it's not mainstream, it's not shared by this council in a professional corporate sense, it's not shared by me. But I'm very happy that you can have a conversation with colleagues, including individual members, if that's what you would find helpful. But I just want to be very clear about where the council stands. This is not for us. And I have to say, I know something of the WHO. I know a lot about central government. I know a lot about NATO. I work there. I've seen nothing to indicate anything other than good people trying to do a job with varying degrees of success. And communicating with the people next door successfully, I have to sort of say, has been a challenge, let alone connecting more up. So, I'm afraid it's not for us, but thank you for coming and being so frank.
Maybe if we could sit down together, I'm sure I can show you lots of things that point to the points I'm trying to make, evidence to back it up.
I thank you for the point, and I hope to have been equally clear. I think that's mutual respect, really. You've been frank, and I hope to have been as well. Thank you very much, Ian, for coming.
Thank you.
We've got two speakers on the next subject, which is Mill Weir. Francis Wagstaff, I think this is, and Liz Austin. If you'd like to come up in turn, thank you.
Before I begin the 3 minutes, I just want to let you know I represent the CO1 Residents Association, but I'm sure what I'm going to say is of wider interest to the whole community. Thanks very much. I'll start. We urge the budget holders to secure funds to reinstate the iconic Mill Weir Bridge as soon as possible. It's much admired by visitors and an important scenic route into town. The adjacent King's Meadow is also regularly used for car parking for those attending the many festivals and events in the Lower Castle Park. To have the direct route blocked over the Mill Weir Bridge to the Lower Park is very detrimental to the Colchester visitor experience. Meanwhile, the issues I'd like to raise with you relate to interim diversion arrangements. The arrangements put in place since the collapse of the Weir Bridge has caused consternation. We recognise the initial speedy response, but since then little has been done to refine and monitor the diversions. In case you are unaware, the diversion routes are the pathways on either side of the river from the North Station Road Bridge. The signs, when they haven't fallen in the river, need to be more ample and helpful. Also, the diversions themselves need to include more accessible options. The riverbank steps are a dangerous option for a significant section of the public. Budgeting allocation is needed for the diversion routes to cover ongoing repair, improvement and upkeep. For example, more can be done to make the river walk diversions safer. Currently, routes are very dark and unlit at night, or only partly so from lights in nearby buildings. The diversion route view from the river bridge is now dismal, with current low water revealing muck and detritus, including those highway diversion signs, some of which have ended up on banks. The route towards the Lower Park is dangerously uneven at the North Station Road end. The steps leading to King's Meadow are steep, narrow and worn, and can be slippery in wet and icy weather. After work has been carried out to solve these issues, we need funds allocated for regular monitoring and upkeep, checking, for example, that barriers and signage remain in place and that the newly exposed riverbanks remain clear of rubbish. As a final point, we would like to make the Council aware that our resident association members in the riverside cottages below the steps are particularly impacted by these issues and will welcome all efforts to improve routes. The residents are elderly and or disabled. The adjacent stalled riverside office conversion project has meant they have lost their previously accessible route to transport, including their own garages and cars. The increased foot traffic past their cottages has compounded their ongoing problems with the ASB emanating from the North Station Road area. We therefore urge the relevant bodies to undertake a proper survey of the recommended diversion routes and ensure that they are brightly lit, accessible, safe and attractive to walk along. We also request that plans to restore the bridge are agreed upon as a matter of urgency and that strenuous efforts are made to secure earmarked funding to reinstate this important, attractive route into our city centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I ask whether you know each other or not, if Liz is,
we do.
then I'll ask Liz to come forward and then perhaps we'll respond to you both at the same time. And
Thank
Liz.
It's on. Ooh, right. I'm live. Right. Well, I mean, obviously, I agree with the points raised by the previous speaker, and I have to fess up that I'm a member of the Residents Association as well. But I just wanted to add some personal information and a suggestion, really, that I hope you will take in good part. It's relevant to mention then, I live on one of the roads that leads through the Lower Park to that Weir Bridge. So normally that's my very beautiful route to the castle and to the town. And I often meet tourists and visitors going to the castle or going to the town, coming that route. The short time the bridge has been down, I've met very confused tourists. And one of the reasons is that their sat-navs still take them, a walking route into the park. And I had one lady who was coming back with two small children late at night, and she was very dismayed that the signage had taken her along that dark pathway, and had been sort of quite disturbed by the fact that she'd got rather lost. So I think the idea of signage, which is really, an interim set of signs that takes you through an attractive route, is really important. And I think that problem can be turned into an opportunity. Firstly, because those river walks, which at the moment, as Fran described, are sort of rather dismal and dingy, they could be made attractive, I think, permanently. They could be a very attractive route, not up North Station Road, but encouraging you to come along the river or through the park. In addition to that, I just wanted to mention that there's another quick win, I think. At the moment, if you come through Lower Park and you come to the Weir Bridge, I don't know if you can sort of visualise this, but as you come through Lower Park, you come to the Weir Bridge and it's blocked. And it says diversion, you have to go all the way back round to the cricket ground, all the way around the cricket ground, which is a sort of 15-minute walk. It's substantial if you're disabled in any way or you've got little children. And then that can lead you back into the park, and then you come through the park and up. But in actual fact, when you're at the Weir Bridge, there is a little entrance which is now been opened into the cricket ground, very pretty little gate, and it takes you to that very pretty pavilion. And you can walk, avoiding the ground, you just walk a few steps across, and it takes you to a little bridge that gets you into the park. And that's your route to the castle. But there's a gate that's shut on the other side, and I have to confess that very naughtily I climbed over it, which whether you should actually. And I talked to a park warden and said, if you could open this, you'd have a very pretty route and you'd have visitors happier once again. So he said, no, not beyond my job, and no, don't please ask me to pass on the message. So I'm passing the message to you now. If you could possibly get that little gate on the other side of the pavilion opened, and then signpost that route, and you've got a pretty route back again while the Weir Bridge is being fixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Liz. That's brilliant of you. Could we get a second chair out, please, so that our visitors could come forward? Could you do that? Thank you. I'm not letting you off, Liz.
Thank you.
Can I thank you on behalf of all of us? I should go in a moment to Councillor Martin Goss, who's been tracking this as close as any has in terms of the remedial work. And I think between us, we'll just make sure we pick up the other points. But if I go to you, Martin, in terms of the central questions in some respects about the response and then the timetable, because this is not yet visible, and then we'll see what else we need to pick up. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this whole situation is very frustrating for many stakeholders, and of course it isn't a simple project to fix and is not going to also be cheap. Yeah. It is going to be a serious amount of money, and I don't know exactly how much that's going to be because that's still being walked through. At this moment in time, there is a stakeholder group of officers that have been brought together, which includes or needs to include Historic England, Natural England, the Environment Agency, Essex County Council, Anglian Water, because they're all stakeholders in this in various ways for different reasons, for different responsibilities, etc. But Colchester City Council obviously has a huge part to play as, again, a major stakeholder. So all of those bodies, officers are talking and looking at options. And publicly, I've always spoken that there are 3 potential options. And we've been awaiting specialist engineers to come up with what the high level costs would be against all of those options. And of course, an option in these cases can be do nothing. We're not suggesting it is, but there is always a do nothing option. I'm a project manager by trade. That's what I do in my professional day job. When you write an options paper, doing nothing is always an option. We're not suggesting it is. So the structural engineering group was asked to obviously look at this at the time when it happened. Obviously, this is just pre-Christmas, so of course everyone in the engineering and building industry goes pretty much into shutdown. So I wasn't expecting anything to really emerge until January. So we have got a specialist team looking at this. Unfortunately, one of the specialists who was supposed to look at this had a road traffic accident fairly recently, which was quite serious, although I believe that they are now out and involved again, but that didn't help the situation because it was their assignment. So it has been looked at recently, and we are now awaiting the formal engineering options with costs. So we should get that shortly, and then that will give us a better indication of how much money, what the options are, how long it's going to take, and then we will have to look to get funding. So I'm hoping to see that in the next period, and then obviously we will publish that as quickly as we can to keep the public updated. But that is the reason that there's been a delay, and you have to be a little bit careful putting stuff in the public domain about people's personal circumstances, but obviously I'm sharing that, but obviously you can't identify who that person is. So once we've got that, obviously, of course, the options will have to be discussed with all the stakeholders, and until such time, we obviously can't leave that bridge open because potentially it could collapse and wash away, and we obviously can't put the public in danger. We will take on board comments about the diversions. Now, some of it will be down to land ownership. So, for instance, the cricket club is another organisation I'm in touch with for a different reason. But of course, they lease bits of that land, and they have obviously rights across it because they are the tenant. So again, we would have to look at any suggestions about diversions across other people's land, etc., and just double check land ownership, leaseholding, and everything else. So I will take that away. I will ask officers to have a look at it and see what we can do to improve it. And again, whether there's anything we can do. Now, there has been some cleanup of the river done. There has been quite extensive, surprising rubbish taken out of it, including some of the old spin scooters that were thrown in there originally, which we didn't know about. So we are, again, trying to clean it up as much as possible. More work is planned for that, but actually the river being level it is not actually being helpful because you can't always safely get to some of it. So we are doing what we can. So in summary, we will publish the options as quickly as we can in the coming weeks once we've actually received it, and stakeholders are happy or it's been challenged. We will look at the routes. I can't make any promises. I'm always really straight with people, but we will certainly do what we can. Obviously, some of it involves Essex County Council, and there can be some complexities about the speed that sometimes we can operate at, with closures and advertising routes. And we will obviously keep the public informed as quickly as possible. Also mindful, I've promised to meet the canoe club, but there's no point until I've actually got something to talk about, because at the moment we don't have the costs. We don't know exactly what the options are. So that's it. It's quite complex. It is going to take time, and even once we get the options and decide on it, it's many, many months of work potentially to reinstate, rebuild, do what it is we decide to do. So this is not going to be quick. But we will push it as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that's answered the heart of your questions. I think the only thing to that comprehensive reply, thank you, Martin, I'll just add is there's an opportunity to look at usage of the river, and up and downstream by its nature, daft thing to say, it's connected. We should have to have that kind of conversation as well. And as Martin says, there are different pressure groups, and with a view. The only other thing I think we might acknowledge is the importance of communications. We've done our best on this, and there'll be more comms out on this, but we need to look at the local residents and make sure we're getting something around to them directly. Mark, you had something to add?
Yeah, nothing of detail. I just want to say thank you, because you both come forward and eloquently put your point, and admitting you're from a residents' association is nothing dirty at all. I think it's fantastic. It's about representation. Yeah, it's about representation, and that's what we all try and do. We all are residents of a particular area. We just happen to be fairly gobby about getting up and talking. I just want to say thank you for that. And your experiences are so important. You've given experiences of other people. So Martin has listened, he's given a technical response, and I think David made some encouraging points too. I think to take on board to bookmark the fact you've given this representation, and hopefully Martin will keep your details to make sure the Residents Association is kept up to date as well. But the other one thing I felt as a Essex County Councillor, as David is too, that the future routes that you talked about, in particular Liz, to make sure they are better. I've walked up and down, and they are undulating on almost every path that Essex look after, but if we can improve that and improve some of the lighting, just because encourage people to walk along there is fantastic. It is lovely along there. The amount of Instagram and social media pictures of those little cottages and where you and your neighbours live promote Colchester in a good way. So let's look at that for the future as well. So I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you, and please don't keep shinning over fences and walls.
Sorry, I
can I just say one more thing?
Please do. Yeah.
So yes, we knew that it was such a complex thing, and that's why really we're taking the tack about the diversionary routes. You know, they really do need to be, and some of it isn't about money. It's about monitoring. I mean, I don't know whether park staff can notice, like for instance, the barriers have all been dislodged for the last 3 days over by the Weir, things like that. And we do report to our local council, and then he does get on to the powers, you know, whoever's appropriate. But sometimes it should be built in to the strategies that somebody is monitoring. And again, when the signs went up very quickly. Didn't anyone notice that the signs had gone down? Like where there were Essex County Council signs, and they said, "Oh, where have they gone? Oh, they're down the river." Yeah. So it's that, and it is the safety aspect about the lighting and things, and also, you know, I'm a sort of dog walker over King's Meadows, so I can't underestimate, you know, overestimate just how upset people are about it. You know, regularly asked about, oh, when do you think? Oh, we've heard. Sorry, Martin, but, oh, we've heard July. We've seen it on the neighbours' WhatsApp and things. So they are so keen and really do, you know, can't wait for it to be done. But thank you very much.
Thank you both very much. Councillor Lee Scordus. Lee, is Lee there? Oh, Lee, please come forward.
Thank you, Leader. And you and Councillor Coy must have the patience of saints after last night's meeting and another meeting tonight. So my 2 points to make tonight. First one is on the Weir, on Middle Mill. But my points were more linked to how we got here, how we've allowed this to happen, because we had a similar instance with Fieldgate Quay, where we didn't notice there was a problem till a resident reported it. And even then, I don't think we acted till half the quay was at the bottom of the Colne. So clearly there seems to be an issue with some of our infrastructure like this that is close to the water. So I guess really the question is on this bit, how, are we monitoring these sites often enough, or whoever we pay to monitor them, are they doing it often enough? And it seems like they might not be. And obviously we are a town based around a river, so a city now based around a river. There may be other sites that may become a problem, but it's really worrying that a site as important as this, we didn't notice till it completely collapsed. The second one is on what I imagine others will speak on later, is on the what I consider to be a rash decision, the closure of the cafe in Leisure World. I'm wondering, first of all, have we known how long it has been losing money and how much? You know, has that been going up year on year? If we haven't for some time, why have we not changed the model? Why have we not modernised the cafe? Because let's be honest, it's very drab. But there are lots of customers there. There are lots of people, such as running groups and so forth, that will meet there. Is it too expensive? Are there ways we can encourage more parents to eat there? So we give, instead of going to McDonald's, we say to parents, actually, your food for your children is free at the cafe. So spending more money there. But we also have a commercial company, and it's quite worrying that we have a commercial company and we're not utilising them to go, right, how can we get this cafe to work in what is very busy and a very vibrant site? So for me, there are concerns there. When we need to raise money, actually, we do have this site. I mean, we could rent out the site and that could give us some income. But my feeling is actually that there are possibilities here. I understand there's been issues with the Northern Gateway area, but that's a relatively new area. This area, Leisure World, as we know, attracts not just parents and gym users, attracts a lot of teenagers who use the skate park and so forth, and have for the last good old 40 years. So for me, I think it would be good to evaluate how we could improve this site, and actually, are there options here where we can improve the cafe and look at how we can actually make some money from this, whether that is closing earlier, opening earlier, maybe getting commuters, I don't know. But for me, we've got a commercial team that I think can look at options.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. Please stay there. I want to ask a question of the officers. thank you for your patience. There is, as you may know, a petition with support. In fact, I think there's probably several petitions out there for support for not closing the cafe. So let's deal with that first of all. I will want to respond to them in the way you would expect me to. We'll just sort of say very simply here that a number of individual members have raised this. It's interesting, we do huge macro changes, don't we? Worth millions, we have to go and do that. And very understandably, people pick on something that they know on an individual basis. Somebody talks to them about it, and we've had approaches from colleagues in our own group, mixed spindle amongst them and others in this audience here perhaps as well. So aware of the sensitivity, we're going to pause that saving measure. We're going to give the time that's needed for the team to really look at the alternatives for refreshment or whole of the area. I know they've had, I think the last count, half a dozen different organisations in touch. There's no lack of interest, and that tells us all we need to know. A real possibility here about what we could do with this. But while we're doing that, it will stay open. I think there's a slip, really, always intended to, but we weren't clear enough in confidential annex that has led to the story being out swiftly. So these things go. So it will be looked at very closely. It will be communicated to members and the public, but absolutely can say will not be closed. And we will pause on taking the measure while we have a look through the options and their implications for individuals who are employed there and for others. But we're with you. It's got a huge potential, and you've described that well. So I hope that will give you and members of the public assurance, and we'll pick that up. As I say, it will stay open, and we'll look to help the officers make the success of it that it could be. On your other issue of maintenance, sorry, Martin.
I was just going to say, I have a timeline on the area that Lee has mentioned, which I can go through if needed.
Do, and then I'll come back. Okay.
Yeah, so a timeline, I have it here. So July to November 2023, leaks have been noticed by the sluice, and officers believed that maybe some debris had got caught in the sluice gate, causing visible bubbling of the water, which needed to be cleared. It's common for this to happen at that time of year. 30th of October, an email was received from the Canoe Club, and they raised cracks in the abutments being an issue in the ECC owned bridge next to Mill Weir. This was reported to Essex County Council. Their response, no change since 2017, no action needed. Week beginning the 4th of December, a park ranger noted on inspection that part of the weir had been undermined by water erosion, causing a significant sudden drop in water levels in the river. I was notified about this, and also the Environment Agency were informed, and that is when cracks were noted in the brickwork. 10th of December, park ranger reported collapse of part of the weir structure. The bridge was then closed, initially by our own staff as a temporary measure, and then Essex County Council stepped in because they own it and they are legally responsible. 20th of December, 30 ton bags of ballast were installed in the river around the collapsed structure to try and prevent any further erosion of this. And the 8th of January 2024, the Mill Weir working group was set up, as I've described earlier, to obviously push forwards with replacement options, and there is a fortnightly meeting in place. So just to give you a bit of a timeline there, that actually Essex were notified and came back to say no problem.
Thank you very much, Martin. I hope that's some help in terms of the narrower point, if I can put it that way, but the one that most of us are focusing on at the moment. The wider point about the condition of structures, assets for which we have a responsibility. I don't think there's any doubt that the City Council over many years in making the difficult choices it's had to make to keep key services live has not always invested as much as it might in asset maintenance and oversight. Now, it could be debated, but I think on the evidence of the Moot Hall above us, it's fairly clear to me, has been for a while. That was then. Where we are now, and the budget in front of us is seeking to remedy that. So specific allocations for maintenance. There is going to be a fund for the Moot Hall. There's going to be an investment to follow. elsewhere. And there is an asset review, which is going to be comprehensive and will look at the essentials of use, purpose and future, cost and value, and including upkeep. So we're going to get in the right place during the course of the year that lies ahead, and that will be widely shared and will involve members, as you would expect. So it's a fair point that many of us would make, but we're on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Good news on the cafe, reevaluate that. On the Weir issue, Martin, if you're more than happy to forward the timeline to me, I will chase that as county councillor straight to Director of Highways, because for me, I think this inaction is very, very serious. And I think actually as a council, we should be looking at legal action to get them to pay for this, because it's absolutely disgusting. For me, it could result in someone losing their job. It's that serious. This is really, really important. It's disgusting we've been let down by that. So thank you. And it's public now as well, which is good.
Thank you very much, Lee. Okay. We go on to item 6. Decisions reviewed by the scrutiny panel. There were none.
None, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. In which case we go on to item 7, resources and housing. We have got 6 members wishing to speak, so I'm going to take those first, and then we will pick those up when we work our way. Excuse me, Christina Reid-Wellam and 6 councillors. And Christina, I'll call you up in just a second. If you could bear with me just a moment. I just want to make sure that we all understand here how we're going to run this. So this is a huge amount of work compressed in a lot of paper, and members have given this a very long test last night to get under the skin of it, and mostly in a positive way from their feedback, and Councillor Corey and I were amongst those there. But what we're going to do in the next time, see how long it takes, is our Section 151 officer will give us an overview, including our reserves and his assurance as to the viability of the budget strategy. I will then set out the strategic drivers and pass to Councillor Corey, and then up to other cabinet members. And then between us, as we work our way through, we'll respond to points that we haven't picked up at the beginning from visiting councillors and the public. We're going to take this in 3 slices. Such a lot of material, I want to have a genuine pause. So what we call the general fund, that's where we cover our operating costs and running costs. The housing revenue. Thank you, revenue accounts, that's what it says on the tin. That's our 6,000 strong stock, how we maintain, extend it and use it, and the capital section of the budget. So we'll have an intro, we'll have 3 slices, we'll take them together as a cabinet and pick up commentary beforehand. But let me work our way through our have your say. So Christina Reid-Wellam, you're very welcome to come forward, please do. Sorry to keep you waiting a moment. I hope the context is a bit of help. Okay, now if you've heard how this works, 2 minutes, press the red button, get 2 minutes, then you get a kind of warning bell and another minute, and then we'll pick it up then, or we'll pick it up later. Thank you.
Thank you. Connection is why we're here, and it's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. It's a great quote from Brené Brown, a researcher and also a storyteller. Connection is why we're here this evening. As loyal members of Colchester Leisure World, we are shocked and saddened to hear the news of the plans to close the cafe due to financial loss. You can see within the petition and its supporting feedback it is an incredibly short-sighted decision that will impact everyone who uses the site regularly. Therefore, we are asking you to stop and rethink these plans, work with the current staff and maybe some willing and respected members of Leisure World to explore how best to manage the cash flow and plans to make it remain part of the community, is people-friendly, profitable and fit for the future. Cited in the Council's 3-year strategic plan, improving health, wellbeing and happiness is at the forefront. I read the Council received £3.5 million health funding to combat important health and sociability matters, including loneliness and social isolation. Refer to the article dated the 12th of January 2023 regarding progress and efforts to improve health and well-being. Fortunately, we are far more knowledgeable today than ever about the correlation between, the correlation between mental health and exercise, and how exercise is not only vital to improve our physical, but also improve and promote good mental health and well-being too. The brain powers the body. Research supports mental well-being powered through exercise and social ability of exercise. Social connections whilst exercising in one of the main drivers of the blue zones, the 5 areas of the world where the happiest and healthiest people live. Regular exercise can help combat some symptoms of anxiety and depression and support women as we age and go through the menopause. GPs and other medical professionals will suggest exercise as part of a holistic approach to health and well-being. The cafe is unique in position that it could support people of all demographics to meet and exercise either for a walk in the park with a post-walk coffee or after swim and exercise. See the heartfelt comments received from May Cook and others illustrating this point. The cafe is a key part of the overall package and experience as to why members choose Leisure World. Key users include sporting and other wellbeing groups, individuals with special needs visiting the site to improve their motor skills and enhance communication skills through people interactions. Older groups gather here to catch up with like-minded individuals to bond over exercise and shared experiences. Parents, children, teens, pet owners, people who live alone, and not to mention the general footfall that happens to stop by. The list goes on. In essence, the cafe is a hub for everyone within the community to thrive, enhancing mental and social well-being, providing a safe space for all its customers all year round. Losing the cafe would impact all sorts of people, including those hard to reach and vulnerable within our community. Given the research and evidence provided, we are asking it would be possible to keep the cafe open for at least another 6 months or more. This opportunity will give the talented staff, along with extra support if required, to review the financial model, monitor peak times and just opening hours and staffing accordingly, investigate different revenue streams, exploring how best to manage and maximise the sole revenue for the cafe, design a targeted advertising approach to promote the cafe better for its key users, with targeting some of the groups I mentioned in the list above, which include the vulnerable and hard to reach communities to help profit and keep people engaged and healthy. Leisure and fitness is an all-inclusive people industry, therefore people should be at the heart and minds of the business. People have had their say, and from this it's clear there's a real need and want for the cafe to remain open and not to be repurposed.
Thank you. Could I just intervene? I'm very happy.
Of course.
Are you nearly at the end?
I am. I've got one little sentence.
Go on then.
Let people continue to increase profit margins whilst creating a caring and kind space that improves health, well-being and happiness. Thank you for your time, ears and support.
You have our time, you have our ears, and you have our support, as we said earlier. I think that was hugely eloquent. And in many respects, it makes the kind of case we make elsewhere when we make choices in this city to look after those most in need. That connection between our minds, our soul, and our physical health, you've made that very well. Thank you. I won't repeat all we said before, but you've had assurance on this. I think Councillor Corey wants to say something briefly. If I will ask him to do that, we have to get on with the core business. Thank you so much. I'd like you to make sure you leave your details with us, contact details, yes, because I think it would be really good to see if we can't, in whatever way is appropriate, and this will be run, this exercise and these choices will be worked up by those who run the centre. This is how these things come about in any event. Mark, but could you brief?
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Like the others, really well spoken. It's great to bravely come forward and speak, so thanks for that. I think it's important to explain how we got here. We have had to make significant amounts of savings as a council over a number of years, from sort of reduction of government grant, squeezing of the finances, interest rates, inflation, bad economy, you name it. But that's no reason to go against the points you've said. It's just me trying to explain how we got here. And it was one small part actually of paying for the other costs in terms of pay increases, for example. And it's not that we were thoughtless about this, we had discussed it, but actually there was a slight issue with communication in terms of what we felt we were doing and what was then communicated out. And I think the leaders made it absolutely clear, for every reason that you've spoken about, it is absolutely right to review, to look at that, to not close it, and to look at other opportunities of increasing the income, but making sure there's a place for people to connect. And councillors around this table the other night in the Lib Dem group made that point, and we have listened. Other councillors tonight have made that point, and you and other members of the public have made excellent representation. So we are listening. Are ordinary people who are taking on that point under a lot of strain of services. So thank you, Christina.
Councillor Luxor-Vaughan.
Yeah, I understand your need for brevity, and I didn't particularly want to share what I've shared with the group, which is a personal story of why I found the cafe so valuable. And as you say, it's not just about being healthy; it's about being with like-minded people that you can share things. All I really wanted to say was, if there's going to be a team being set up, because obviously this isn't something I talk about very much, but you know, in my past life, retail and leisure were the things I did on a commercial basis, and I'm really happy to offer those services to the council if we want to look at some brainstorming, some ideas of how to make that more commercially viable, which I think is a non-brainer. It's a great footfall. It's got the customer base. It just needs a little bit of a tweak to make it work.
Press the button.
Is that right? Yeah. And similar to Martin Goss, in fact, my background is project management, so I'm more than happy to, yeah.
Well, let's leave it at that. We've got volunteers, isn't that a
Wonderful.
great thing? And we'll get ourselves together and work with the community and whoever else has a passion for this. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Please pass that on. Visiting councillors. I've got Councillor Law, Councillor Warnes, Councillor Dundas, Councillor J. Young, Councillor Pearson and Councillor Sunnox. If you would be good enough to come up in turn, and I'll remind you in case you forget down the list where you're at, and then we'll go into presentation and a response and a broadcast, if you like, sharing of where we are and what we're doing. So Councillor Law first.
Hello, that's much better, thank you. Good evening, Leader and Cabinet. Nice to be here again this evening, as I enjoyed attending the scrutiny panel last night as well. So thank you. I'm here in my capacity as Ward Councillor for Highwoods, and I just want to raise concerns really on behalf of residents at some of the impacts that cuts in the budget are going to have. And I wanted to really sort of concentrate on three specific areas. Firstly, the proposed cuts to services in Highwoods Country Park at the Visitor Centre. You know, it's a very popular destination site, the Country Park, has a large footfall. It's recently had a refurbishment of the play park, and being able to use the refreshments facilities and also the toilet facilities, that's really important for people who visit the park. You know, it's important in terms of those that may have accessibility needs, or for families with young children, that they're able to access those facilities. And also that, you know, that there are people around in the park if there are any emergencies, or, you know, any, you know, antisocial behaviour. I'm also aware that the there are areas such as forest areas that schools use, and those have been subject to antisocial behaviour and vandalism. I'm concerned as well that, you know, there's been fly tipping in the country park, and that less resourcing at the visitor centre could mean that this kind of situation and behaviour escalates, and that you could see, you know, increased costs in terms of dealing with sorting out the impact of fly tipping or antisocial behaviour, vandalism. So saving money in one area could cause costs in another area. So that's one sort of area that I'm really concerned about. Secondly, I've also seen about the cuts to the Highwood Sports Centre budget. And that's a facility that's right in the heart of a community in Highwoods. It's very accessible, easily reached by foot or by public transport. You know, I understand that there's a huge amount of resourcing going into the Northern Gateway Sports Centre, you know, Colchester Sports Park. But as I say, Highwood Sports Centre is right in the heart of a community and is really important for people's health and well-being. And my third point that I want to talk about really are the cuts to the proposed community facilities, St Mark's on the old rugby ground site at Mill Road. You know, it's disappointing because for health and well-being, being able to make social connections at community facilities is really important. So it's really disappointing to see that being cut. You know, I understand that there are plans for the proposed community green, which is really important, but that's still some way off. And for example, last summer during a growing season, grass in that site along the path, it became very long. Dog fouling was quite common because there was long grass. People didn't feel the need to pick it up. So it didn't, you know, if community facilities are cut, for example, in the country park and at sites such as rugby ground, residents might have a perception that the council aren't concerned about providing, you know, good facilities that are, you know, in the open air. There's a cost of living crisis, so it's easy for residents to access, but, you know, if they become unattractive or are subject to antisocial behaviour, that really puts people off, and people may feel that the council aren't supportive. And I think all the sort of sites and the examples I've mentioned also really link into the importance of health and well-being. You know, that is something that's in the council strategy. It's something we've discussed at policy panel as well. And, you know, I'm really impressed by the partnership the council have in terms of working more closely with the health services. But, you know, it raises concerns really that cuts to the amenities that I've mentioned might signal that the council isn't concerned about people's health and well-being, don't prioritise that, and also, as I say, when there's a cost of living crisis, that they aren't concerned about providing accessible facilities, you know, as I say, for those who might be financially challenged or for those with accessibility needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll answer briefly, so please say. We've got a fantastic record, and your party has been part of that in recent years, and you're an informal partner now, and you know this. You know the scale of the challenge that faces this council. Every member does. Members collectively have acknowledged that. Sometimes it's informally, sometimes it's formally. But you and your group, I hope, really do understand the scale. And it will be a question of hard choices, and we're going to make them as thoughtful as we can. So I continue to say it's about least harm, most good. That's the balance we will seek to strike. But there's 2 or 3 things it's worth picking up. So, you know, we'll listen. I'll ask officers to go back through the specific points you made around the letter, around the visitor centre, and the fair point, if we can quantify it, that you might save some money and lose some money. We'll see if that is valid. I think it's a reasonable challenge. But more widely, you know, I know this area well. I'm the county councillor for it. I live nearby. If we are lucky enough to live in that patch, Highwoods and Marlin, we are blessed, frankly. We've got the Highwoods Country Park. We've got community centres in and around the area. We've got the sports park and 70 acres to walk through. We've got the leisure park, just months from starting to open up, and the first parts of that site are, you know, we are blessed in terms of what we have, to be frank. And this is not to say it's anything other than fair. If you see a change that you don't like or you think residents might not like, but I think we have to keep some balance on this. You know, this council looks after people, and it does so in a cross-party way. We look after the most vulnerable, to which you made a reference, and we do so, in my view, a superb way. We win awards for it. We help thousands of people each year. So I hope that you can see this in the way, at least acknowledge the points that I'm making in the same way I acknowledge yours. And I should mention that when we talk about the St Mark's facilities, we have to acknowledge they've always intended to have a primary function of supporting the development alongside. which hasn't happened yet, is some years away. We get to that later on. Maybe a case then to be looking again about what we do with that social space, should we say, until we decide on its future. It would be wrong to spend a lot of money now ahead of the facts and ahead of the use. At the moment we have sufficient capacity, but we're going to, as you know, modernise and extend the life of what we have in the current centre, which is right in the high woods. I hope that gives you both an acknowledgement and a context. And as I say, we'll have a look at that neat point you made about whether or not there are some compensating aspects to this. Thank you.
Could I just come back briefly? Also, in terms of sort of facilities at the visitor centre, due to the, footfall, is there scope, for example, as in with Leisure World and Maccabi there, to see, the scope for helping, attract more people? It is a sort of a destination play park. And it's a very popular area for people with preschool and up to older children. So it might be that, you could sort of piggyback off, increased usage with the revamped play park. That might be one thing. And just returning to your point about looking at the site of, where St Mark's would have been in terms of those facilities. I appreciate that we have budgetary constraints in terms of what we can do, but it's just important to be able to kind of maintain or to keep a site sort of so that it's attractive and usable for residents and doesn't become unattractive or put people off using that area. So thank you for looking into that and for giving me your time. Good evening.
Thank you, and we'll follow that up. Thank you very much, Jocelyn. Councillor Wars, Martin, if he's here.
Intended to make remarks before we
Thank you, Councillor Pearson, for the hundreds avidly listening in. Councillor Martin Warnes wasn't able to join us, but the points he wanted to raise have been raised and answered. That's great. So, Councillor Paul Dundas. Paul, I think you know what to do, dear boy.
Probably just about working out. Thank you. Good evening, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to repeat 4 hours of scrutiny. I did watch it. Well done, everybody. And I don't want to turn it into a budget debate. No doubt we will have further budget debates, and of course we have full council to come up. But I've got a few comments and questions. My first question is, there's been an announcement this evening that the funding settlement has changed. It's going to be core spending plus 4%. I doubt that's going to make a huge difference, but I'm sure our Section 151 officer will be able to tell us what that amount of money is, and you can tell us what you're going to do with it. My second question actually has just come up on coffee shops. There are 2 coffee shops operated. The figure for the Leisure World one is in the confidential section, so I'm not going to say it, but it's a small amount of money. It could easily be turned around with a bit of work. However, we have another coffee shop which is losing 50,000 a year. So my question is, why are you closing the one which is hardly losing any money, but apparently, at least on the face of it, keeping the one losing a fortune open? It doesn't seem particularly sensible if you're looking to save money. And I also just want to pick up on what came out of scrutiny, particularly around the reserves. I'm pleased to hear that our Section 151 officer is going to explain that soon, but we do need something in writing in this budget on what the actual financial state of the council is on the 1st of April 24, because you need to be able to make a judgment as to whether it's a prudent budget you are passing, and then we are passing as councillors in full council. I'm going to give a couple of examples of why it's so important. On reserves and debts. Now, if we look at the last audited accounts for Cale, Colchester and Fora Energy Limited, it shows, and they're audited, so it says in very clear writing, there is a debt to Colchester City Council of £1,699,634. And that was owed to the council as of the 31st of March 2023. So my first question, along with the coffee shops, is has it been repaid? If it hasn't, when will it be repaid? And when we're talking about reserves, it's important because when you look through the MTFF, we are looking over the next 5 years at a cumulative deficit of 7.354 million. That means in simple terms that if everything goes perfectly to plan, if all the extra income comes through, interest rates don't go below 4.8% next year, every single saving is achieved, everything in this budget actually happens, we will burn through 7.354 million of reserves by 28-29. Because that is the figure, the deficit over the MTFF, if you add up the deficit each year. It is, add it up, if nothing changes, because that's what it says. Because you've got a deficit there for a year, and each year you use the deficit, you're gonna have to fill it with something, you can only fill it with reserves, it's simple maths. And I also just want to talk about the fit for the future a little bit, and why it's going to be very difficult unless you really do expand on detail, hopefully on February the 1st, for any councillor, frankly, to make a judgment on this budget and vote for it. We have in greening and street care cuts of £1 million. I repeat that, £1 million. And the entire description for a cuts of £1 million to greening and street care is service options appraisals. Now, no councillor with a good conscience can go and vote on the 3-word description service options appraisals. They need to know, £1 million cut, they need to know what it actually means. And hopefully you will explain that. But that is actually better than active and wellbeing, which has a £750,000 cut, because that only has a 2-word description, interim transition. What does interim transition mean? Presumably we're transitioning to something, and presumably we're transitioning to something which is interim, which isn't even the end destination. So what does it actually mean? You need to explain it to people if they're going to make any judgment on it. I think I'll probably stop there, but you need to get this out there, the detail, because parties also need to have the opportunity to read it, they need to have the opportunity to understand it, and they need to have the opportunity to develop and put in amendments to some of the things you are proposing. So can we, hopefully we'll see it by February the 1st, and please, it's going to have some detail in it, because in all good conscience, you shouldn't expect councillors to make a judgment on it without the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I kind of think you went a little bit beyond the I shan't do what we did last night, because I've recognised some of the ground, but the points
I was trying to give some answers.
No, I thought during the course of 4 hours, actually, in those exchanges.
Just one point, actually, last night, I might have missed a few bits because Mr. Hartgrove's microphone wasn't working for quite a big proportion of the meeting.
It was working where I was, Paul, but look, let's walk back up your list. So we start and end, and you and I have had this conversation before we got to scrutiny. Of course, we need to ensure that members have sufficient detail to understand the decisions that were being made. But I think I said then, I would say now very clearly, there is a huge amount of information, and you have to make a structural balance about how much. Now, you might recall, I think you were there, Paul, when we had members in, and for the first time had a clarity where spend went that would help anyone make a judgment about what they felt about the council's priorities and its expenditure and its income. So it's not like we've come out of the blue. We've been having briefings at different points during the last year, and we got to a great deal of clarity before Christmas. We've had alumni, and we have another briefing to come for members, and we have that information to which you refer the 1st of February, which is going to fill out a lot of the detail. So you will have to decide with your colleagues, as will others, whether that's enough. I would say, and I need to say this, I'm not a chartered accountant, but I really do understand government and how it works. That this, as a budget strategy that looks ahead through the MTFF, in a way, let's be frank, past budgets haven't always, is a really good signal of intention with quite a great deal of information to support it. And in that sense, it goes a bit further than sometimes we might. What's going to come through in February, which will have scrutiny in the middle of February, is going to fill in more of what you could see as the residual headline detail. It's not going to get down to 6.3 people over here at this cafe. Let's get back to that in a moment. But it will give more information. It will give a loud, richer picture. But I think you have to take it. I ask you to take it in the way I've described. This is much further advanced than many long-term change programs are. And the whole approach and style, and you've been good enough, thank you, to acknowledge it as to be as open and transparent as the circumstances allow. So in my view, I'm really crystal clear about this and really crystal clear about this as a budget strategy, which provides significant detail in year one and a great deal of supporting information. This does hit the mark. It carries the confidence of Section 151 officer. We'll hear about that in just a minute. I, however, do take a couple of the other points. It is important that we give clarity across the piece. So we'll take away, if somebody can answer it, that's fine, but I don't want to go into all the detail tonight. What we're doing with relative coffee shops. We picked this up because it's a member issue and it's a public issue. We're approaching everything we're doing with a very critical eye, looking at choices and income. And I'm very happy to ensure, as before, that these decisions are ones that take account of members' views as well as the realities we face. But frankly, it's realities that has to shape this, and that's why we have to drive this budget. I'm not going to go any further, but Mark.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Paul. We had some good discussions at the Leaders Budget Alumni, which again I praise the leader for doing, because it helps with openness. You and I think Councillor Davidson were there as past leaders from your group, and it was helpful. One of the comments you made was about giving more detail for the Fit for the Future programme, and we have explained last night, and we're explaining again today, on the 1st of Feb, we will have more information. In the paper on page 71, I think it's 71, that might be the other agenda, but 4.4 Appendix C, we do give more detail. I just wanted to correct something you did say, because I think sometimes the way perspective is, there's perspective about the deficits, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but the perspective about how we read the Fit for the Future programme, I think you'd got a bit wrong. You said £1 million with street care and greening programme. There is around £1 million in the neighbourhoods service, but actually the street care and greening programme is £100,000. So you've got that wrong to times 10. Hopefully when we talk about the budget, we'll make sure we get that right. But it is £100,000 budget impact, whereas overall the neighbourhoods, yes, there is a much larger chunk, but almost £1 million of that is from garden waste and looking at other alternatives of bringing in income. So that deals with that. The one other point, and I'm sure the Section 151 officer will do it, so I won't take too long, David, just explaining about the deficits. The one thing I would say is we are, in this year, because of the Fit for the Future programme, because of the tough decisions, we're able to balance a budget in the coming year and actually put a bit of money back into the reserves. The following year, yes, there is a deficit, but we will address that because our legal duty is to pass a balanced budget. So we'll address those deficits. So therefore, addressing them, delivering the Fit for the Future programme means that actually we only have reserves going into the budget over the next few years that are limited and focused for particular reasons. And I can explain that later. Otherwise, we will be aiming to deliver balanced budgets, and therefore we will not rack up those deficits that you've said in that way, and instead we have smoothed with reserves in the last few years. We will put aside a contingency within reserves for the Fit for the Future programme in case there's any slipping and in case we need to do more work to invest to save. So we are doing everything we can prudently, and we will aim each year to deliver a balanced budget and therefore no deficits. Thank you.
Paul, I think the last thing I might round it off, and just a reminder for those listening as well, and I know you're aware of the dates, but we have, I mean, it's an open door. If you have a particular issue, please do feel free, as before, to come to myself or to Mark, or indeed for any one of us, but do feel you can. And then we look through the coming weeks. We've got the 13th of February, we've got scrutiny, we've got information ahead of that. We've got on the 14th of February, we've got a member briefing. And of course, I know we've got full council, and let's be honest, by then everybody's made their mind up. What is most have? It'll be interesting to see the usual dynamics at play. So we've got period in which information can be shared, views can be taken, and if we are able to help genuinely open-minded members to take a view on facts that trouble them, we're going to do it. But I do, I kind of end where I started on this. Against the professional standard, I think it's reasonable. We've got a rare vision here, and it's carefully crafted to be more than singular. It's intended to fit the council, to address the whole of the council's operation, and to earn widespread support. But it's going to be, you will know this, we need to say this, it's the starting gun. Your point about delivery is well taken, which is why Mark's referred to reserves we'll set aside to ensure we can respond to delay and difficulty, because that happens everywhere, frankly. And then it goes through round the lap, here comes the specific proposition, here comes the test and challenge, and we're at this for 3 years, things will change. What's important is we're really clear about what we've got to do right now in setting the scene for the MTFF.
Thank you. I'll just come back very briefly because it's getting late, but talking about the greening and street care, it's in table 4.3. There's 100,000 in 24-25, 150,000 in 25-26, and another 750,000 in 26-27. They're the big cuts. And it just says greening and street care, service options and appraisals. So it goes back to what I said earlier. If there's no detail in it, people make assumptions. On the MTFF and talking about just accumulated debt, I've got a query actually, it might be because I haven't got my glasses with me. If we look in 26-27, you've got net expenditure of 26,497 and funding of 25,819. Is that 819 or 816? 816. But you say that's a surplus. Just how is that coming out as a surplus? Because to me, the expenditure is more than the funding, and you're saying you've got 1.31 million surplus.
We'll ask the Section 151 officer to pick this up with their explanation of the whole. Shall we? That might save time, Paul. That's okay. I know we've got this debate. We don't want to have it lengthily.
I know there's been a bit of debate about the presentation of the MTFF, but an explanation on that would be good.
No, I get it, but I want to, just because other people are watching and someone listening to this for the first time, they don't know what the pleasure we can have walking through these numbers. But we did make a promise last night.
And an answer from the coffee shop at the end will be good.
Well,
thank you.
As I've said, we'll work our way through that, Paul. I'm happy to address that later on. Thank you. Councillor Julie Young, please. Hello, Julie.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, councillors. I want to say a big thanks to officers that I know have burnt the midnight oil in getting to the stage we are tonight in terms of looking at this budget. Their work is appreciated. I won't go into the detail of the budget proposals. That will be a matter for another day. However, I think it's worth thinking about the context of this budget. Across the country, councils are making difficult decisions. The BBC report today features Somerset Council, where they're turning off all their CCTV cameras. Other councils are making equally difficult decisions. If we take a glance backwards, the formula grant settlement in 2009/10 for the council was 12.168 million. Had the government grant kept pace with inflation, this 12.168 million would be worth 18.5 million at today's prices. If we remove the new homes bonus, which was never intended to be used for running costs, our government grant this budget round is 6.9 million, resulting in a real terms 2/3 reduction in support since 2009. This reality, together with inflation, the impact of the cost of living crisis, the burden of meeting the escalating homeless tally, results in the situation we face today. Leader, I'm not a chartered accountant, but would the Leader of the Council agree with me that from 2010 onwards, the funding from government has been inadequate to meet the needs of our community?
Thank you, Julie. The answer, unavoidably, it's an apolitical answer, is it has proved inadequate. And the thing I track know you do. You mentioned Somerset. I've looked it up. It's much wider than CCTV. It's down to stopping having beach guards, closing sports facilities, theatres, and or at least withdrawing the grants, and much more else. So I had to be kind of frank. I'm a sad, nerdy person as I am. Don't say anything to my colleagues. There's 14 councils have gone into Section 114 since in the last 20 years, but quite a number of them in the last 3 or 4 years. And Somerset, to whom you refer, who found a £35 million slice of a £100 million hole in their budget, are just one more example of a deep challenge and problems across the whole of the nation, and the nations in the plural sense. And lastly, you will know that the Local Government Association has said it could be 1 in 5 councils who are privately saying they're at risk. So thank you for setting the context vividly and eloquently for what we're seeking to do, with as much support as we can gain from your and other colleagues across the chamber. We need to address this while we're able to command our circumstances. What the difference is, and we've heard some tonight, there will be as nothing compared to having commissioners to whom there is no accountability. They can decide as they wish. And actually Somerset, their plans including raising council tax by 10%, because that's one of the things you can do in those exceptional circumstances. So thank you very much for coming to the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chris Pearson.
Evening, Leader. Evening, everyone. Local authorities up and down the country are faced with a problem that is mostly not of local authorities making, is a problem that we face here. It's quite right and proper that every now and again a local authority should refresh, look, determine whether or not there are efficiencies that can be made, or there are services that could be repurposed, or even maybe are no longer fit for purpose. But we're not in that situation. We are in a desperate time. And we're not the only local authority that is in those desperate times. I just wanted to quote something from the House of Commons Library. The National Audit Office estimated in 2018 that local authority spending power had fallen by 29% in real terms between 2010 and 2018. The Local Government Association has forecast that inflation, including pay demands, energy price costs, rises, etc., will add £2.4 billion to previous budget forecasts for 23-24. My Labour group leader has already made reference to Somerset Council, and there are others who are reported on the BBC today as being in grave difficulty. So we're not at that stage, fortunately, but we are in between a rock and a hard place, and much of that is because of the low support from central government since 2010. The other area that hasn't been considered this evening as well, and is referred to in the BBC report, is the amount of money that local authorities are having to spend on homelessness that wasn't anticipated. And I'll just quote from a Liberal Democrat council leader who suggested that of every pound that's being collected in council tax, 49 pence is going on temporary accommodation. 49 pence out of every pound. I mean, that is ridiculous in the 21st century. So I think that just leads me to my final point, Leader, and that is the recommendations that you have this evening to put before full council. And you've got in 2.3 recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can I suggest that there should also be a 6th recommendation? And that recommendation is that we work collaboratively with local authorities up and down the land to make representations to central government for fair funding for local authorities.
Thank you very much, Chris. I certainly will reflect on the latter point. I will just say that, of course, we have been doing this, as part of the raison d'etre of local government is to connect, particularly in crisis. So there are a number of alliances, if you like. Some of those are cross-party, which my personal view is the best, and nationwide. Others have been East of England and North Essex councils, and of course there are some cross groups, particularly on issues like homelessness and housing. But the principle of what you've suggested, absolutely, you're absolutely behind that. So thank you, and thank you for your time again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have Councillor Sunnox next, William.
Good evening. I was at the 4-hour session at the scrutiny panel, and I don't intend to rehearse it, but I want to ask some questions and to also alert those who weren't there some of the points. I want to, I see that there's a recommendation from the scrutiny panel asking for 3 extra bits of information, and that's great. So it's really good. Still really unhappy with the budget, and feel that the administration, this is an opportunity for them to really pull their socks up and get focused in a slightly different way and a different direction. I want to talk about also, we've heard a lot about how the national cuts and how it's sort of the fault of the government and everything else that we have trouble. And I'd urge that we focus internally, and coming from the private sector into the council in 2022, I observe an organisation that has an awful lot of quangos and unnecessary long reports and year-long pieces of work, all sorts of stuff that really could be cut and should be cut before we go cutting real frontline services. I see it as a hugely inefficient organisation. So I don't really feel bad that real terms cuts have come from central government. And I also think particularly today, when there's been an announcement there's going to be some further money for local authorities, I think we should try and stop blaming other people and say, good, we are getting some recognition and support from elsewhere. So I don't really accept the sort of, the blame other people line that we've heard from a couple of speakers this evening. I've just 4 questions that I hope that the panel considers, and I really think they should take some care before approving this budget. The first is, do you really think you could convert this year's deficit into a small surplus next year without doing anything specific? And Fit for the Future seems to be a process that you're starting on, not a specific set of proposals to do less, as we've acknowledged that we have to do. There doesn't seem, we can't identify what we're actually going to do less of. And our track record isn't very good, and we can debate staff numbers and so on, but our track record, we haven't actually cut down staff numbers in the past. So that's my question. Do we really think that we can achieve that turnaround? And I will bet a chocolate ice cream, which is my highest reward, with anyone who will take it, that we will be nearer my estimate that we're actually bleeding at 5 million a year than that we achieve a surplus. And we'll see who that's wrong. And that's defined in terms of total decline in reserves, not in terms of what you can actually see on the front page. Second question. I think I've covered it actually. Do you really think that Fit for the Future will work within the year? Third question. Can you possibly evaluate a budget without looking at the reserves? Do we have any way of understanding how many years deficit spending we can continue with? And we haven't been given a reserve forecast. We don't really know where we are in reserves now. We've got nearly 2 years without any accounts, nearly 4 years without any audits. What if there's a big audit adjustment comes our way? These things do happen. We're restructuring some of the companies, and as Councillor Dundas has referred to, there's going to be some write-offs in those connections. We need to see a forecast of the reserves and an evaluation of what the risks are if we're to be able to evaluate this budget. And we haven't got that at the moment, so can you really approve it this evening? And the last point is, did you all realise that this budget by approving this budget, you're approving doubling the debt? And the bulk of the extra spending that's doubling the debt is going to be spent on social housing, which might yield us 1%, and the debts are going to be costing us 4.5%. Did you realise that that deficit will be costing us £3, £4, £5 million a year? And have you thought, this is in 5 years' time, have you thought what we will do to cover that deficit? My view, chartered accountant, I think it's a crazy budget, and we'll hear no doubt from the Section 151 officer that I'm wrong.
You will, William. So I'm going to keep this very brief. Yes, we are going to approve this budget. Yes, we do have confidence in it. Yes, it's properly constructed. And actually, some of your colleagues at least acknowledged that after those 4 hours of torture or stroke pleasure last night. Point about reserve awareness, you've had sight of that, but we'll address that later on. I will accept your bet, okay? You better buy a large one and a couple of pints to go with it, because frankly, serious matter though it is, you're just plain wrong on this. And I hope that, although it's been tried before, that we can between us give you more confidence in the quality of the work and the quality of the organisation than you see. You and I have had the frank conversation, I hope you won't mind it again here, which goes, this is not your shop, your show, it's not mine actually, I'm just doing my level best with a fantastic team of colleagues and members cross-party to help the Chief Executive and her great team of senior people to bring this organisation to that better place. On that much we agree that it needs to be in a better place, fit for the future. We're not blaming others. It's easy to do it and there's facts to support it. We accept responsibility for where we're at. All that you've seen, tested, I think we've mostly been proved so far about right, has been on that basis of it's our canoe, we'll get paddling, and I want as many people inside it, William, helping us do that. So look, I'm going to stop there. My socks, by the way, are pulled up. I'll leave a couple of remarks to Mark and then we can crack on with actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is pass the budget. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. A couple of things. Your question 2 was about fit for the future. We have explained that more detail will come on the 1st of February. But just to reiterate some of what I said last night and just to make clear, the garden waste service is something we had to take a difficult decision on. And that's something where we've stopped doing the service that was there before and are bringing in a new service. So that's one thing where we've made a difference. Then there's written in the detail about holly trees, for example, and how we're making a change there. There's also the channel shift that I talked about last night and how that would mean investing in different programs, more digitalized software would mean we would require less resource, i.e. less staffing, which is written in there. So that's another example. Final example at the bottom, small, but another example of where we are accepting a different staffing structure and less staff is building control. So there are examples in here and there will be more examples coming forward. The other point that you've raised a number of times, but I know you spent time with our Section 151 officer and the deputy talking about it, is the deficit spending. So that is something that in the last few years, through turbulent times, we have used more of the reserves, but actually forecast going forward, we are in the forthcoming year, 24-25, contributing a small amount to the reserves. In the following years, 2025, 26 and 26-27, we'll be putting in specific £200,000 chunks in each of the budget to put contributions from reserves in. However, we are aiming to deliver balanced budgets in those years. At the moment, we are forecasting a deficit in some of the years within the medium-term financial forecast. But as I said to Paul earlier, it is our goal, through the reduction in services and staff and costs of 25% through the Fit for Future programme, we are going to try and keep accelerating that with a contingency fund that I talked about as well to match those differences. But I'm sure the Section 151 officer will reiterate those points. Thank you.
Thank you, William. If we've got a final 20 seconds or so.
I think it's time we heard from the Section 151 officer. I'll be
That would be
interested
good.
to hear.
Thank you very much. That's an accident. It's nearly 7:45. I'm going to suggest we take a few minutes. Thank you very much. Let's take 10 minutes break and then we'll start with the show from the Section 151 officer team. Thank you very much. media. Ooh. Please hold up your phones to the screen. Thank you. All right. Okay, folks. Actually, after 2 hours, I'm now going to go into the budget. I think actually, probably usefully, we've covered an awful lot of the central arguments, and the case for why we are doing what we're doing in as wider and open a way as we can, and why it's in such good hands, in which case I now refer to Section 151 officer. Andrew, please come up, and as you do, a huge thank you again to you and the officer team for all you've been doing for us. I know that that's a cross-party view. You might wonder in the push and shove and the heat of the debate, but absolutely there's a huge respect for you and your colleagues, so thank you. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening, Cabinet. I had a short slide deck. I don't know whether that's available or not. I'm conscious that we've probably covered a number of the points already, so I'll try to be brief to ensure that'll be appreciated. And if at any point that I'm covering ground which I think you're all comfortable with, then just please. Otherwise, I can do it through mime. If that's
It's amazing how long time will be when you're waiting for something.
I can start going through it if you like, and just do it verbally if that's okay, and if the slides come up, perhaps we'll catch up. So I think it's not lost on yourselves that this has been one of the most challenging budget years we've probably had to deal with in many years, and it's clear that we can't carry on as councils try to approach balancing our budgets in the same way, and we need to deal with the issues that we're facing at a more structural level, really, which finding longer term and sustainable solutions to this. And that is part of the overall budget package that's in front of you this evening. So, thank you. Second slide, please. Oh. So what we need to do as a council is look for ways to maximise our income streams, drive out efficiency, review all of our asset use, and focus on affordability. I think we're all in the business of providing services really to our residents, and the last space we want to be in is actually making cuts to services, to core services. So as I said, the budget this year has been one of the most challenging to address, and as you know, that there was a gap that we had to deal with. The actions that we've taken to deal with that budget gap are to maximise our council tax increase, 2.99%, which works out at £6.33 per annum. We've developed a Fit for the Future programme, which we've spoken about already this evening, and there will be more coming through the democratic cycle about what that looks like and how that will be achieved. We set out to achieve a savings from salaries to cover the cost of the pay increase, the additional pay increase that took place during the current year. And we've looked at the reserves, and I think there is some capacity in our reserves to try and smooth some of the savings targets that we need to identify. And finally, we've reviewed the capital programme as it's an integral part of the overall budget of the council, because its financing costs are so important in the overall budget round itself. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. I'm not going to go through that in detail, but we identified during our considerable engagement around the budget an overall budget gap of £2.369 million. That was further adjusted as we went through the month of December. The approach to balancing that is savings from Fit for the Future in 24-25 of £1.8 million, some salary savings of £480,000, And part of the review of reserves work identified there was capacity to utilise or reduce contributions to reserves of nearly £600,000. And all of those combined together means that actually we can contribute to our general fund balance a figure of about £335,000 in total. Next slide, please. When we feed that into the medium-term financial forecast, it shows we have a balanced a balanced budget for 24-25, but there's a gap in 25-26, and then the balance of savings from Fit for the Future really kicking in 26-27, and our deficit comes down dramatically at that point in time, which is, as I say, a part of looking forward to balance the budget rather than approaching it through a cuts exercise annually. As I say, more to come on Fit for the Future. It's been commented upon about whether that's an understatement of the level of cumulative deficit that the council faces. And the number has been put forward that it's a higher figure, but that assumption is on the basis that we do nothing over those intervening years to tackle the budget deficit we've identified, and we have a statutory responsibility to address the challenge in front of us, and we will deal with that. But I think we're going to present it differently in terms of the overall final report. So the next slide, please. Fit for the Future. I'm not going to dwell on that, other than to say that it's an integral part of balancing the overall budget over the next few years. And there's £1.844 million worth of savings factored into the budget plan, and some larger savings in future years. We do know to lever out those savings that it will require investment on the part of the council, and we'll need to essentially pump prime that work with a pot of money in order to invest, in order to deliver that investment to make those savings. Can I have the next slide, please? Just moving on to balances. There's balances come in two flavours. There's unallocated and then there's earmarked. So our unallocated balances are a general fund balance, and we set ourselves a minimum level of general fund balances to hold in the event of unexpected costs. Our current minimum level is £2.175 million, and that's what we opened the year with, 2023. But as you'll know, we forecast an overspend during the current year of £1.4 million. So it just goes to show just how volatile local government finance is at the moment. And I think that for me, that emphasises that probably right now having a higher level, a minimum level of general fund working balance would be appropriate. There's lots of, we've already touched upon the issuing of Section 114 notices of councils facing bankruptcy, in essence. There's various national media stories out there, from 1 in 5 councils to 1 in 10 councils in real imminent risk of issuing a 114 notice. And I think the leader referenced a statistic about 14 114 notices having been issued. If you go back 4 or 5 years, and we were in, a Section 114 notice was virtually unheard of, really, until Northamptonshire County Council probably in recent times issued one. But now it's rife in the media, and there's so much talk about it. There must be a structural problem within local government finance, and that's something we should not, we should be aware of, and we should not ignore. And that means taking difficult choices, I think, to balance budgets, and I believe this budget does just that. So I thought I would recommend that the council moves to a higher level of unallocated general balances, and this budget does add a contribution to the unallocated balances of £355,000. And we'll look to a wider review of the earmark balances to hopefully make up the difference. So I can have the next slide, please. So earmarked reserves, and I know this has been a topic that's received much attention and much discussion over the last year, and I understand the need and the desire, the importance of having clarity about the level of reserves that the council holds and the demands against that. So we have been working systematically through that list of reserves. It's tied into producing final accounts information. And we work through each reserve to test its individual validity and future demands against those reserves. That work thus far has identified at least a couple of reserves where we think there is an opportunity. One is a pension deficit reserve. The pension fund has gone into surplus, and I think that will remain so for a while. And whilst it is in surplus, there's no point in making either a contribution to it or holding a balance against it. And I think we'll deal with a deficit in the future if it indeed does go back into a deficit. The other one is the business rate reserve, where we have commissioned a piece of work from some professionals in the sector who've identified that Colchester is doing very well out of business rates growth for the most part, and I think there's capacity within that. So now it's better understood what our level of reserves are. I think we should continue to review those to see how they can better help the council deliver against its strategic ambitions. And that's a piece of work that I think we still need to do. If I can just go on to the next slide, please. I appreciate there's quite a lot of information packed onto that slide and therefore probably difficult to see. But we started the current financial year with earmarked balances of £28.5 million, which I think is a healthy position to be in, really, by any measure. If you could move on, please, again to the next slide. Sorry, back one. Capital programme, just to say that we have reviewed it. We did a review in October. We followed through on that again in terms of a further review that's part of this overall budget solution. There are some key additions to it, including Colchester Northern Gateway enabling works and repairs to the Moot Hall. We've put in provision for capitalised repairs to the council's major assets, in fact all assets, and provision for ICT schemes as well. And we've taken out some of those schemes which are temporarily paused while we look at reviewing Northern Gateway generally. And I can say that the capital charges that are part of it, that are the consequence of that capital programme, are reflected in the revenue budget, so they are consistent, and that's an important part of bringing the capital programme and the revenue budget together at the same time. Again, if we can move to the next slide, please. So housing revenue account, just quickly to say that it's balanced. It does include a rent increase of 7.7%, so not 7.77, 7.7, which is CPI at September of 6.7 plus 1%, which is the maximum that we're allowed to increase. But all of the income generated from that rent increase remains within the housing revenue account and is utilised to undertake repairs to the council house stock. And you'll also see that from the overall papers that the housing revenue account balances over the MTFF period as well. And but there is a review planned of the housing revenue account during 25-26 that will look at the long-term affordability aligned to the 30-year business plan that we have for the housing revenue account as well. Last slide, please, I think it is. So I just wanted to give the Cabinet some assurance, really, from myself as the Section 151 officer. I would say it's been 9 months since I've arrived at Colchester now. And I think one of the things that we did identify that the council's approach to its finances have been prudent over a long period of time. And I think that's important. My predecessor was very cautious in some of his assumptions. And I think that gives the council a strong springboard in terms of developing future year budgets. It's a balanced budget proposal that does include a contribution to general fund balances, bringing up general fund balances to perhaps a stronger level. I think there's a clear and demonstrable ambition within the council and cabinet officers to address the gaps that are in the MTFF, and a clear plan to deal with that, really, as well, through Fit for the Future. I would say, looking at reserves, I think they're in the Goldilocks zone. I think it's not too much, not too little, but just about right. I think for a council of this size with this council's issues, and there is some national statistics out there being prepared by the government which supports and reinforces that as well. And I think, we are in a fortunate position with our business rate growth as well, which will help provide confidence and reassurance to myself and to the Cabinet around the level of balances it will have in future years. I am required as part of the overall budget package to issue a Section 25 report to Council, which is a robustness of the budget report from the Section 151 officer. And I am happy to do that based on the information that is presented here and what I've seen in terms of budget development work. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification? Martin.
Yeah, it was just actually to pick up with the heat network and how that was treated. I think we ought to just expose that.
So it's been discussed as part of governance and audit as well, really. So it's been raised in that, and I think I recognise there's a risk around unwinding of that scheme, and it does need to be addressed. I think it's one of the things we need to pick up as part of our overall looking at the reserves that the council's holding. Whilst it's in a comfortable position, I think we need to identify and understand what all of the risks facing the council are, and make sure that we adequately provide for all of those risks. So there is some work to be done before we close the accounts for 23-24, and that will mean working out what the transactions are to unwind the heat network scheme. I believe that the number is a couple of £100,000 that the council will have to probably write off. But I think there is risk around some of the base grant, and I think that's what we need to reflect within the council's overall approach to understanding how much reserves we hold on to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin, for raising that. Anything else from anybody else? If not, then let's move on. Thank you very much indeed. We covered such a lot of what would have been opening remarks, then I was suggesting to myself and others we don't do that, that we go to the recommendations of the scrutiny panel last night, which I'll read them just for clarity for colleagues I think you've got to cite, but for the record. We had 3 recommendations from the scrutiny panel that we have further information produced to support the Council's consideration of the 24-25 revenue budget and medium-term financial forecast. Statement of reserves for the period, consistent with reserves position, well that we've walked through. I understand absolutely the instinct from colleagues of seeing how we can stretch that view into the future, but many imponderables in there, especially if we accept that what we're going to do in each and every year is address any additional pressures or the ones that indeed that are stated. So it's likely that it'll be what we've had tonight. We have asked for some additional notes with it. So the second thing is, the first thing is statement of reserve, the second thing is a Treasury Management Strategy statement or further information on the current position. And I understood that the latter was more feasible in the time that we have. And thirdly, a supplementary note to the forecast to provide clarity and explanation regarding Appendix C of the budget papers and the cumulative deficit figures. And this was touched on earlier. There are at least a couple of ways in which you can set this out. So we're going to make sure that both are shown so that we answer the concern about how things can be misread. So those are the 3 points: statement of reserves, Treasury Management Statement, supplementary note on the MTFF. I'm going to go to Mark Corey on our behalf. Mark, is there anything you want to add on that, or are you content that we recommend to Cabinet?
I think you've made clear that we have discussed this at length in terms of Cabinet discussions, workshops. Again, you've been very open with bringing in members of the Labour group, working with the Leaders Alumni group. So it has been looked at, and we will continue to evolve. And I think these recommendations from scrutiny are absolutely fair. and useful. We explained at scrutiny again why or why not some of this information was there. I think the reserves point is absolutely fair. We've talked about this, leader, haven't we? That it's important to do that, and we will do that in a sort of draft caveated form to say, for reasons I explained yesterday and the Chief Finance Officer did just now, we are still refining in terms of being prudent with our reserves, but also looking at how we use them flexibly going forward to invest in order to save as much as possible. The Treasury Management Statement was discussed last night briefly, and I think it's useful to attach that and then to attach detail that shows the current situation of both borrowing and investment that we have at the council. And I think it's a matter of perspective as to how you do read the papers. I think whatever we do, it's complex, local government finance, and whatever we can do to make it clearer about how the deficits or the cumulative surplus deficits are shown, we will do that as well. So I think these are reasonable. I think we had a good scrutiny process. You, leader, and I both enjoy challenge and rigour, and so do the officers. I think we've got to be clear that this is a prudent council that has been prudent over the years, and the Section 1.5 officer believes the medium-term financial forecast as outlined is also prudent. I wouldn't want to, whatever people's perspective and challenge, which is welcomed, wouldn't want to undermine this council by saying we get things wrong or the figures are incorrect, when it is more of a matter of perspective. When it is an issue that we want to bring up, we'll take it away, or like with the recommendations from scrutiny, we will take them on board and deliver. So we will do that. So lastly, I'd say thank you to all of the members of staff who've contributed to the Fit for Purpose, I keep saying that, Fit for Future programme, and the additional savings to meet the cost pressure increase in staff pay. I'd like to thank the finance team and their new leadership with Chris Hartgrove here and Andrew Small above with the strategic responsibility of the Section 151 officer. And officers like Richard Block, who have dealt with a lot of the sort of negotiations between us as politicians and officers and the finance team to make sure we can land these proposals. So I do think it's been an absolute team effort, and I think with Pam's leadership as Chief Executive as well, it's one that has been inclusive, understanding of staff. This will be difficult for staff. We understand that, a reduction in numbers of staff, a reduction in some of our services, but also for residents. And I'll make one final point. I am a resident of this great city, borough, and a little town outside of Colchester called Wivenhoe. And I pay my council tax. I face the cost of living challenges that our current economy faces. And I believe we sit around these tables and we spend a lot of hours putting our effort into this, as do many residents of the borough who are our officers. And we care passionately about this. And I know, for example, Chris and Andrew here tonight care passionately about the numbers and how they present it. And they've done an excellent job improving how that's done over the recent year. So from a resident of this borough, I commend this budget to Cabinet. I will take fully the recommendations from the scrutiny panel, and we'll go forward to the different meetings we have to confirm the details of the Fit for Purpose plan, to confirm the reserves, the Treasury management and the medium-term financial forecast, to then make sure we pass it at full council. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so members, we'll deal with those two things together. The recommendations from scrutiny, which we recommend are accepted. Agreed? And that rounds out the conversations we've had around the general fund. So do we agree with those recommendations as well? Okay. I'd just like to touch on the next item, which is the HRA, which again had a very lengthy and intense discussion last night. I don't want to rerun that again. It's had the conversation, the papers serve the purpose. I think we ought to just acknowledge that what lies ahead of us includes a really deep review and to ensure that we are confident for the future, that the HRA is viable in every sense, that Colchester Borough Homes, who are a brilliant sister organisation drawing closer yet in the family to the City Council, deliver to the standards we require, and that the way ahead, that review will include a robust examination, fresh examination of performance against a variety of tests, and in a very independent and transparent way to ensure that we will have the competence that we require, which we've had before, which has been shared again recently in the way it's being run and the way it seeks to serve the population. So there's much to do here, but the HRA, as presented, does balance to the terms that are set out in the paper, and we're reminded of by the Section 151 officer. But as I say, we've got a lot of work to do here to give ourselves long-term confidence, and we'll respond to the facts as they emerge from that deep review by the Deputy Chief Executive. Are we content with the HRA element of the budget? Thank you very much. Which gets us back to capital. There's a great deal of information here. I intend to keep it, Mark, if you're content. Really light, is there anything you would like to say on this before I go to one particular item?
No.
Okay, the one particular item I want to bring out, and it's almost thematic, there's about 3 points if you bear with me. One, this still has breadth and ambition, but that carries risks and that carries consequence, and there is a caution in here which we will all acknowledge that's led to some uncomfortable decisions they're right to take in the circumstances. We have had in this last year a very robust review of project management of capital costs, contingency and risk, and that approach has got to continue. So we have to counter optimism with contingency in time and cost. That will underpin, this does underpin this capital programme. The one additional point is this. Circumstances will change and we'll have to respond. So when we judge what we have to do, we're going to have to look at this in terms of its wider affordability and that balance between projects in view and projects that may arise. And I want to mention specifically the Hythe as an example of where we have some significant long-term challenges which are going to take some degree of help and support. We have some outline view of that. We've got a fresh approach with my chairmanship, I hope, with the City Council playing a forward role, but we're not the lead authorities here or on flood or on highways or in the environment, so there still will be stakeholder work. So we will make sure that whatever we do, we have the scope within the wider capital budget to ensure that we address those and emerging issues, and we touched on one earlier, Councillor Goss, on Mill and the Weir. I'm going to stop at that. I've been reminded, and I'm happy to be reminded, that what we've agreed tonight is to pause savings measure on the Leisure World coffee shop, and that will need to be rolled into the final version of these papers before they go through to full council. So on capital, are we content?
Agree.
Thank you. So that is that on that. Right, folks, we'll crack on with the rest of the agenda. Thank you, Mark. You're right. Formally, we have signed off to the recommendations that set out in the paper, which reminds me we had one additional one from Councillor Pearson around cooperation and collaboration, which I would be happy to support if that would be acceptable to colleagues. We'll have a look at the exact language, but we take it away as a point of principle. Okay, we agreed on that also. Thank you very much indeed. It's our way of working, isn't it? We've gone through half an inch of paper, which gets us through to item 8.1. And I'm pleased to say I can see only 2 rather than 6 visiting councillors. Paul, you're first up, followed by William.
Thank you, Leader. If you just indulge me for a minute, I was very remiss earlier. I didn't thank the finance team for their work on the budget. And whilst I might have issue with a couple of bits of presentation, I think the overall presentation is a step in the right direction compared to what we've seen in the past. So I can only encourage them to continue on that route, and I thank them for their work. But to this item in particular, I'm not going to make any jokes about total car crashes, don't worry. But I think perhaps we need to look back on where it came from. I mean, it's probably over 10 years old, probably, the sort of inception of the whole thing. And if we're absolutely honest, this aspect of it on Colchester North and Gateway South, it hasn't been a glowing, wonderful success, really. At the moment, we've got some sort of holes in the ground which cost a couple of £1 million and a path and a demolition site surrounded by Harris fencing. So with the best one in the world, we haven't covered ourselves with glory. And of course, we equally have probably something approaching next to £20 million of capital borrowing sitting on our books at the moment, which we'd anticipated would have been paid off by now, which is, is a drag. However much you quantify it, it is a drag on the council. And the report makes quite a lot of the changed economic circumstances since it was conceived about the cost of borrowing. But, let's be honest, actually, none of that was really mentioned at the time. If I can take you back to December 2018, if anybody remembers that, actually, the very first question I asked in full council related to this project, so this is kind of where I came in, and it was to Councillor Goss. I wasn't picking on him at the time. He was the portfolio holder responsible for infrastructure. And others would have answered the same. And I asked the question about how careful we were with our assumptions and what would happen to the resilience of the viability of the project if there were changes in the economy, interest rates, the housing market, etc. And the reply was, and we had a jolly good laugh about conservative with a small c, that the project was very resilient to such things and the viability was indeed very conservative with a small c. So we can't just blame it all on changed circumstances. Some of it may be. But we are where we are. I think we have to accept, and I think the report does really say it, particularly if you read between the lines, that a project conceived before 2016 or around 2016 doesn't necessarily work in 2024. The mix is wrong, the viability is wrong. If it was ever right, the world has changed. And we also have to accept the council doesn't have the financial resources or the skills needed to develop a huge commercial housing project. That's not a criticism. We're a district council. Why would we? Why should we? I doubt commercial developers are very good at collecting bins, and we know the struggles of getting roads adopted, they're not very good at doing many other things councils do. But stick to what you're good at would be my expression. So the specific points, I think on balance, I support parts 2.2 and 2.3 of the recommendation. You do need to look at it again. We need to look at it again and find a different project for this site. My concern, and I have thought long and hard about this because I do get the arguments on both sides. It is a balanced argument. I am concerned about committing what is a very large amount of money with a very big drag on the revenue budget to something we're not actually 100% sure is necessary. Does it add £7.7 million worth of value to the land? I can't see any details in the report saying it does. If it doesn't, it's a very poor value investment. If it does, well, prove it, and then I might be persuaded. Furthermore, the Section 278 works, they're required for the old scheme, not whatever the new one is, because we can be pretty sure whatever ends up there won't be what there's currently planning permission for. And actually the report basically says it. So you're approving spending £7.7 million worth of Colchester residents' money on a development probably isn't going to happen. And the report says in black and white there isn't demand for that office space. We know why. We know, changes, the world's changed. And I think the hospital, I'm not sure I'm going to ask that specific question, is perhaps looking a bit suspect. So the direction of travel is probably towards more residential, and we need housing, so that seems to make sense. So we also know that traffic is generated far more by commercial developments than housing. So you might find, if you end up with a residential-based scheme, or far more residential, that the Section 278 works required don't need anything like this amount of work because you will have less traffic. So do you really want to spend 7.7 million on roadworks if they turn out to be totally unnecessary? Because it would be money down the drain. So my specific questions are what's the status of negotiations with the healthcare provider? Are they still live? Are there still talks going on? Or should we basically consider that not a realistic thing going to happen? What's the status of the power supply at the site? Because I understand that there was an issue around that. Have we resolved that? And I'm not going to mention any figures, but there are figures in Part B, which is why I want to mention them. But how have we arrived at those valuations? If you use normal appraisal figures, and I know that they are what they are, but even if we use the ones used at tendering Colchester Borders, residential land is usually worth considerably more than commercial when you do viability. But we've got it the other way around. We're saying that the commercial side is worth vastly more than the residential in the report. And actually, if you were to develop the whole site for residential, if you use the Colchester figure available for viability studies, it comes out to 55.7 million. Now, that's of course a gross figure. That's before you take out affordable housing, possible roadwork, Section 106 and other costs. But nonetheless, that's a hugely different figure to the one you've got in your report. So my question is, and you need to be asking, why? So my recommendation is this. Look at it again. Take the parts two, the two latter parts of the recommendation, but work out what you want to do with the site before you spend any more money on it. Don't be pressured by National Highways. By the time a new project has gone through all this appraisals that they're looking at, through marketing, through potential sale of the site, through contract negotiations, planning, financing, and goodness what else, and the fact that you might not even need to do anything to the A12 at all anyway, you'll actually be at the next slot, probably around 2026. That's the timescale. It's only 2 years away. That's the timescale these things take. So I'm worried we're making the decision back to front. We've spent enough on this, enough has gone already. Work out what you want to do before you spend any more, would be my recommendation.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. I assume that William's down here as well. Can I hear from him? So please stay, please do stay at the table and we'll try and deal with it together. William, if I can frame it this way, is there anything different to what Paul said in your courteous best style that you want to add?
I get the clear message that you don't want to hear what I've got to say, and I will take it along that. I want to back up everything Paul said. A lot of the figures he quoted come from the garden community, and I think it's very interesting that we've, I don't want to say anything that's in a confidential appendix, but the figures are so different that we've been presented with there than we're being told to believe in the garden community. So we need to start putting a numeric template around these things, and I can't believe it. We're being asked to spend 7.7 million. There's not a plan of what the road layout is or what it's going to be. It's just sort of 7.7 million we're going to give to someone. I just can't. Words fail me that we're doing that. More seriously, I want to back up Paul's point that we shouldn't be in this business of spending this money ourselves. This is development work. We're not specialists in that. And this is certainly that's something that should be done, I think, by a master developer. And we ought to be moving this site on and not sitting on it and going around in circles trying to do something with it. They're really complicated to do, these sites, and there's lots and lots of bits of it. And I just don't see the council, without any strong appraisal or financial or development ability on board for anything or experience for anything of this scale, I don't see it as a great idea to be proceeding with it. And I'll shut up.
Thank you. I'm going to look forward to some comments from colleagues. I'll just sort of start with, I have some sympathy with, but let's start with what we agree on. Right? We agree that the world's changed. We agree past the past, and a long-term development project has had some successes, we could argue, and here we are with this is a further opportunity, which absolutely has to be looked at afresh. Thank you, Mark. And we will. And I think there's one thing that's not said, on which I hope we would agree. Location, location, location. This site is really well placed if we get the right development to maximise our return. Now, beyond that, I'll only say this, which is, this is not a go now and spend 7.7 million. This is, and I'm sure you've read through the recommendations, this is ensure that people understand where we are today and where we're heading, ensure we have in the capital budget, and it is a choice, I absolutely accept with the consequence, making provision for their capital spend. Now, the way we've worked and the promise that's been given, I'll say out loud, has been that we'll be obviously thoughtful, we'll take yet further advice, we'll do this cross-party in the way we've done before, so that we have in the right place, in the right way, a depth of conversation and understanding. I mean, I'll stop there, but we're probably closer than you might think. Mark?
Agree, and I support that, David, and I welcome the conversation, and we'll have more conversations that I think are important to do cross-party. This is a significant site. There's a number of sites, to be honest. When you're talking about a site, it's not always clear which one you are talking about up there. And in a sense, we have up to this point been in some form or another a master developer, hence why this does fall more at our door. And David, you made some of the points I was going to make. I absolutely understand the caution that you're putting forward, and we listen to that, we hear that, we have that ourselves. We understand, don't we, both your administration and ours previously signing up to the Leisure South development and the risk involved in that. So there are risks due to the economic sort of situation outside of our control, but we are in control. Sorry. You're in control of the mic. We're in control of a number of pieces of land there. So we have to understand what would facilitate going forward the best kinds of economic growth. And the recommendations I'll go back to approve the inclusion of 7.7 million into Colchester City Council's capital programme, to agree to revisit the delivery strategy for Colchester Northern Gateway sites, and to delegate to the Deputy Chief Executive, that is Lindsay Barker, to the rest of us, and she has already been working with a working group on this of officers for the last few months, in consultation with me as portfolio holder for resources, to really look at this in detail. So most of the questions you put forward, we will go over, and we will work with you and other partners across the council to make sure we are answering those questions. And it talks about looking at due diligence, reviewing the development strategy, the market, and potential delivery options to fund any viability and feasibility works needed to progress delivery of the site. So what I'm saying is, hearing you, this is a mark in the sand to say, look, we have a date with highways that we want to meet. It keeps the door open. It does not mean that that money is going out the door tomorrow. Absolutely not. It means that we are earmarking that in reserves, and we will be taking the action outlined in the recommendations. So that will cover a lot of the questions you've asked. Just to go back slightly in terms of, you asked, Paul, for example, asked about where things were with those sites. I think it's best to talk about those, and I will bring you in and we can have a briefing on that, because they are ongoing. So we still have partners involved, but it's about, again, when will they bring forward their options? Will they be the same as first discussed, say, 3 or 4 years ago? They have changed within those 3 or 4 years. So there is a lot to understand, and that's why the group of officers have been doing the work. I have been appraised of that, but I'll ensure that we do that cross-party as well. I'll stop there, Leader. But I mean, one other thing I'd say is it's about investment in our infrastructure. And that's quite important for us to do. We know that we have partners in terms of Essex and National Highways who do that, but when it is under our control, when a lot of the sites are causing potentially new traffic into the future, we need to accept that and look at what we have to do. I use that junction fairly regularly, accessing the Northern Gateway Sports Park, which is a fantastic venue to visit, and the junction is already close to capacity, and that's what highways do say. So it needs looking at, but hopefully that gives some confidence that this is not an immediate decision. This is about opening the door to that decision on the infrastructure, and it's about taking the due diligence, looking back at the strategy, looking at the market, and going from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the only problem is that by putting it in, the capital budget is intrinsically linked to your revenue budget. And by putting it in, you are impacting your revenue budget, and that is constraining some of the things you can and can't do on your revenue budget. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking like capital expenditure is almost free, but it's not. It has, I can't remember on the MTF, I think it's heading up to about 13 million out of £25 million revenue budget. It's capital MRP is very expensive. And the other thing about commercial, I mean, I can't remember who said it, and I'd hope that where it's said today, it would be put in a slightly more gender-sensitive way, but events, dear boy, was somebody once said, and they will always be events. And if you are involved in the commercial sector, you will be buffeted by something and events and difficulties always. And when, having just had a long discussion about how tight our revenue budget is over the next few years, do you really want to be adding any extra risk and commercial risk to that if you can avoid it? We can control development, we hope, by planning. If we say we can't, and we've got an issue perhaps with our planning, maybe not quite as much as we'd like, but my inclination would be, when it comes to very large amounts of money on this project, is to accept that we might be better letting somebody else have the risk, because we probably can't afford it to go wrong again. That would be my only comment. But I think actually looking at it again, and that is there, I think that's sensible. And I won't talk in public about contract negotiations. I'll happily talk about those in private. Thank you.
Thank you. And the only thing I would just add is that we get the point about risk and master development, but there is a reality about our position, our responsibilities, the relationship that we have with National Highways and Essex Highways, and the background of discussions here around this junction and the need to spend on it. So, but that wider piece about development, all I would say is that's well understood. That in my take, I think Mark's as well, we're expecting a transition to a different model. That'll be part of those conversations that we're going to arrange away from here. Thank you. Thank you both for your observations. Much appreciated.
Can I just make one comment?
William.
If you look at where the traffic congestion is, and you can do it so easily on Google Maps, this compared to the A120, this is absolutely doesn't seem to be a priority. When you look at the planning permission that has been given, I don't know how we ever thought we could fill 45,100 square meters of commercial. I mean, that's 3,000 jobs. That's putting a huge strain on the junction. So I really would think that as part of the exercise, I accept you're going to put it in the budget, part of the exercise, we ought to be looking again at the traffic forecasting with a realistic number of office spaces there. No one's going to build 45,100 square meters of office.
We're in the same place on that, and I think that's both in the paper and came through, I hope, in the remarks. I mean, Lindsay's not here, but the Deputy Chief Executive has absolutely been with expert advisors and officers going through those realities as you described them, and what we know from the modelling that's available and the projections forward, in which those who deny or agree to what you might do or some other might have to do have a very strong view. So You're right to point out the fundamentals. I can only just give you some measure of assurance that that's what we're addressing. Martin, I think you want to say something briefly if you could, thanks.
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, that junction is already over capacity. There is data to show that it is already over capacity with the existing traffic modelling that's available. So it's only going to get busier as other businesses, cinema, etc., open whenever they come on stream. So I don't think there's any question that junction is already a problem, because it should have been built bigger in the first place when it was done 10 plus years ago. So no question work is required. And I think my comments are publicly known that I do not like traffic lights, and that we seem to have them all over Colchester, and that just seems to be the solution by Essex Highways. So my comments on that are public, and I will stand by that.
I expect you to, Mr. Fax. That's you. Look, thank you both very much.
Leader, I suggest we go to the recommendations, really. We've rehearsed the arguments. I think Martin's point just there is, yeah, we would all like to look a bit more, look again at the detail of what highways are suggesting, but perhaps that's not for now. That is in the detail that will come forward in this work. It's about allocating the potential to go and do that work, to do more due diligence. So, Leader, I think we've been around this informally and now, and hopefully we'll get to go and work with Lindsay on this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, 2.1 to 2.3 as described, are we content?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay. Item 8 is next. According to me, is that right? 2, Officer Pay Policy Statement for 24-25. Who would like to pick this up?
This is a statutory requirement that we do each year, and I really would say that I'll take the papers as read. I recommend this to Cabinet, and then it will go on to full council as well. Really, it goes through the basics of what we would understand. I thank Jess Douglas in the audience there for the work on this, and for managing our HR across the council, and much more these days that she takes on. But it does also reaffirm our commitment to the living wage, the fact that we do pay our workers a real living wage, and we have always tried to ensure we have a decent spread in terms of officer pay, and also that our gender pay gap is quite positive, in a sense that actually it does lean towards favouring female staff more than it does male, which bucks the trend. And we do have an excellent female chief executive and deputy chief executive. Up feminism. But moving on from that, I would say let's go to agreeing the report. Thank you.
Colleagues, agreed? Thank you. In which case we're on to item 9.1, and I'll look to, oh, I beg your pardon. This is a cracker as well, the managed service solution for temporary workers. I'm a great fan of this, but let me go to Councillor Mark Corey.
I helped you find the papers, Leader. Now I've got to do the same. Again, this paper is something that reports on part of the organisation that we feel needs to be passed, and I'm not sure if this one will go to full council like the last one. So it's just for us, and it's working with our county council contracts as well. The recommendation is to sign up to the Essex County Council Managed Service Solution Framework for temporary workers for 3 years from this April the 1st. And really, again, it's a sensible way of managing the organisation and working with our partners to ensure we look after our agency staff that we need and temporary workers. So I recommend this to us all.
So agreed. Thank you very much. And now finally to 9.1, Councillor Anderson Jay.
Okay then, so this is a look back on half-year KPIs, 23-24 to September, and we're now at the end of Q3. So what I'll do is just give a quick update and review. Can I first of all thank the programme and performance managers for their responsiveness to requests from Cabinet and Scrutiny for a much more detailed and comparative narrative, which I think you do all agree we now have. We now have some really good benchmarking to SIP recommended 15 nearest neighbours, and that's nearest neighbour local authorities based on 41 metrics of similarity. So rather than going for best in the field, we're actually getting a good balance against those that are similar to ourselves. There's 29 KPIs, the majority have been met, 12 have been achieved and exceeded. So I just highlight housing benefit and local council tax support. The customer facing staff should be thanked and congratulated for their hard work on this. They work front end and sometimes in difficult circumstances, and they do a really good job. We can look at the 7 red targets quickly. Those are rent collected. So the number of tenants currently receiving universal tax credit is increasing. This impacts our rent collection because it's often done in arrears. People wake up to 5 weeks for their first payment, which means if rent's due and they're not able to pay it any other way, there's obviously an inbuilt lag in the system. But I'm happy to say that we're now at a 97.68% rather, and against the target of 98. So that's moved on quite considerably since the report. Bereavement services income, the rolling 12 months is in line with pre-COVID, and we are aware there's likely to be a 200,000 shortfall. But assumptions for the 23-24 income target have been tested and will be realistic. And actually the third quarter growth, if that's replicated in the final quarter, will actually meet targets. So it's moving closer. Household waste, recycled, reused and composting, we're off target again, mainly due to less overall waste because of the cost of living crisis and a drop in spending. But from the benchmarking and the medians that are in place, you can see that we may remain below the medians. So we're actually performing better than the majority of our nearest neighbours. Based on 21-22 figures, we are actually 35th out of 333 local authorities. So we're actually in the top 10.5% of performers. So I think we can round that up and say we're in the top, or round it down and say we're in the top 10%. We're not complacent, and as we're all aware, there's a waste review strategy that will drive change that will hopefully move us towards the government targets. In terms of housing, which are probably our most uncomfortable KPIs, the average time to relet has been a focus, but I can report that that's now down to 32.54 days. So again, there's been significant improvement over the last quarter. Repairs and customer satisfaction are still way off target, but these are obviously related to each other and subject at the moment to intense portfolio holder scrutiny and review. So hopefully again, we're doing what needs to be done to move those forward. All the KPIs reported are under a process of review by the senior leadership team, and they'll be coming to Cabinet in February to look at the range and relevance of those that are currently being reported for 24-25. And at my request, they're looking at the inclusion of some customer support, team satisfaction, because I think we need to be reporting on the teams that are performing well. And at scrutiny request, we're also looking at provision of some historical data for context. That's really the KPIs. Strategic delivery plan, quickly, there are a couple of items in red status, and we know this includes the intense resettlement work, which has been ongoing, and the building maintenance, which is part of the asset review. So both of those are part of the senior leadership team feedback, and I think we can be confident that those are being looked at. And finally, accreditations. I think the focus tonight has been very rightly on the budget, but it is worth mentioning the success of the council in some awards, particularly green flags for our open spaces and a Customer Service Excellence Award for the contact team, which during a recent visit with them, they were quite rightly very proud and I think should be mentioned.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. You and I talked about the scope for transformation. We didn't get to that, did we, in the budget terms? Anything you want to add in that sense of where just briefly, where this might go? Well,
just in terms of the transformation, obviously we're awaiting the Fit for Future detail. I'm doing it myself now. We all know that business transformation addresses changes in processes, organisations, IT and technology. It's wide-ranging and disruptive, but it will help the council perform effectively and efficiently. The proposals before us are necessary to drive the scale of change and cost savings that are needed within the council. Having personally been through two significant organisational changes, which actually resulted in a change of role for me literally overnight on both occasions, and having led a business integration process following a merger, I'm very empathetic to the uncertainty of change and the potential loss of friends of colleagues, which is a difficult byproduct of the process. But it also provides opportunities, and whilst some hard and uncomfortable decisions have had to be made, I just think the engagement and the focus of the senior leadership team is there, and that as the detail comes out, we can feel comfortable with the process. Certainly my dealings with the team is that they're all on it, and some of the, particularly IT and technology, will make a big difference to the way we work going forward.
Thank you, very well said, and I know that the officer team will welcome you being inside that loop. So each portfolio holder here has the responsibility of their own patch, but it's really helpful that you, Alison, look across and have a sense, we both agree on this, benchmarking, data, comparison. The thing for us needs to be realism this coming years. There is a price sometimes for keeping performance in the top 10%, as an example. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we'll have to be aware of that as we work through such a significant set of changes. Thank you very much indeed, it's very helpful. Anything else from our other colleagues? Okay, then we've done our duty of looking at this. We've had our feedback. I think we discharged the report obligation to review. We content.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for sticking at this. I'm not going to call a break unless people are desperate. Please just leave. We've had an hour at this. We're clearly, I think, nearly closed now, and which is no disrespect to those behind item 10.1. And Jocelyn, Councillor Law, please do come forward, and thank you for hanging on so long.
Thank you very much, Leader and Cabinet. Yes, I'm just speaking here, and I'll be brief, with recommendations from the policy panel on the 10th of January. Thanks to officers for their help with that meeting, and for Tom Taylor in his presentation on asset-based community development, and also the input of Community 360 into that meeting. And we were very pleased to see the continued progress of a rollout through training in the ABCD approach across council office, through the council. And members were also particularly keen to see that officers, as well as continuing to put that great work into practice in the community, that there could be a spirit of dismantling any sort of barriers or challenges that residents and groups faced in terms of being able to be empowered and to take forward initiatives. Some councillors felt that sometimes it was difficult to progress issues because there might be barriers due to obligations that would be quite challenging for some small groups to be able to contend with. So appreciative of people taking the time to take that feedback on board. And then secondly, I also wanted to highlight an issue on behalf of my Vice Chair, Councillor Scott Bittell. She is very concerned that going forward, that the Council and Cabinet might be able to revisit the responsible dog ownership policies that have been looked at and devised in the past, particularly when you think about the pandemic, and there's been quite a high rise in the number of ownership of dogs. However, there have been significant challenges when perhaps people return to different working patterns or cost of living circumstances arrive, and sort of irresponsible ownership of dogs in terms of behaviours and also in terms of dog fouling can have a significant impact on community. And perhaps in the future, the Cabinet will be minded to review that work. That's all from me. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Jocelyn, and for the work of the panel. I attended that. It was an interesting set of conversations on other matters as well, which, as you know, we're picking up, including around accessibility. And so, look, Cabinet members, you've got two recommendations here around ABCD. The latter was around removing barriers and red tape affecting that work. We've had a supplementary point from Councillor Law, which is would we have a look at, would officers have a look at dog ownership policies? I'm very wary of any of these issues in the sense of not yet having had the chance to do this, but as a question from any member, the answer is always yes, of course, we'll have a look. You know, there is law and regulation which we will understand frames our or restricts what role we have, but that's a reasonable request. So if colleagues are content, then I ask that we agree with the two recommendations made in the paper, and we also note the request to review dog ownership policies and the potential role for the City Council. Are we content on that basis? My apologies, I assumed that we were content with this, but yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you for hanging on. Right, 11.1, progress of responses to the public. Anything you'd like to say to us on this, Richard?
I have nothing further to add to the report, Chair. I think they've all been dealt with.
Okay, on our collective behalf, can I say a huge thank you? This is, you know, you capturing a sense of the complicated exchanges, I continue to say, is a remarkable feat. And with the help of colleagues, tracking all the ways in which people ask for something from us to ensure that they get, you know, the ultimate courtesy of at least a response, if not an action. That's great work. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, if we're content, then we'll go on to 14.1. Oh, this will be part B, won't it? In which case,
yes,
one of the best roles for the Deputy Leader of the day, if he can remember the words to go with it.
I stand ready, Leader. In accordance with Section 1A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information for personal, financial, legal advice in Part B of the agenda printed on the yellow paper can be decided. Exempt of information is defined in Section 100I and Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Thank you. We have to agree to adopt.
Do we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. With excitement.